All right, Mr. Chair, we're on the air whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so I call the meeting to order and want to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag,
of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it
Okay.
stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. David, go ahead.
Thank you, Commission. Good morning to everyone. Montecito Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orca areas. Rebroadcast of Montecito Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays after 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Moving on to the roll call. Commissioner Kubiak.
Here.
Commissioner Senauer.
Here.
And Chair Police.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Miller will be absent today, and Commissioner Keller will be joining us a little bit later.
So the consideration, you want to move with that, David? Or is that something we're gonna?
Oh, sure. I'm happy to do so. So the next item is for the commission to reconsider the circumstances of the COVID-19 state of emergency, consider whether state or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing, to consider finding that the legislative body has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency and that the state or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing, including the letter from Public Health Officer Henning Anzerg, MD, and Public Health Interim Director Daniel Nielsen, dated September 1st, 2022, and to consider directing staff to continue to notice and hold hearings as remote hearings consistent with Government Code Section 54953E3.
So we don't need to vote on that because we did last week or 12, right?
Chair Police and Commissioners, I actually would recommend us voting on it
Okay.
because our next hearing is November 16th. So
Yeah, we
to
need
stay
it.
remote, not have a special hearing, I say let's go ahead and take action today on it.
Okay. Let's take a vote, Mr. Villalobos.
I believe I need a motion in a second first.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right. Commissioner Kubiak.
Aye.
Commissioner Senauer.
Aye.
Chair Police.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Thank you.
Okay. Agenda status report.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Commission. Thank you. In going over our status of our agenda, we have one item on consent, which is the Montecito Debris Nets Annual Maintenance Report. And then in regards to the standard agenda, I'm going to try to make it as less confusing as possible. I received information yesterday that Commissioner Keller may be attending the hearing late. She had a personal matter to attend to this morning. And I understand that Commissioner Kubiak has a time certain that he has to leave at 1 o'clock. So because of that, I would like to recommend some changes to the order of the agenda today. So that way we can attend to some matters that have some date certains for the Planning Commission and the board, which is item number 4. So looking at the status of the agenda on item number 3, we have a request for a continuance from staff in regards to further analysis that needs to be completed before we can, so we can prepare or revise findings and bring it back to the commission. And then number 4 is the zoning ordinance amendments package. And then we have items 1 and 2, which is the development projects. So I would like to recommend that we change the order to put number 3 first and take up the continuance item. And once the continuance item has been resolved, then we can move to number 4, which is the zoning ordinance amendment package. And then after number 4, we'll just resume the standard agenda, which would be 1 and 2. So I would recommend the order be changed to 3 and 4, and then 1 and 2.
All right. Well, if there's no objection, I'd like to proceed with the recommendation of Mr. Wilson. So shall we look at 3 and decide that you want to continue it? So how do you want to offer that, Jeff?
So that's as long, Chair Police, as long as that's in agreement with you as a chair, then we can proceed with that order. And then I can move on to the projection report. And then those that are on, they'll know what order their item is.
Okay. All right.
Right.
That sounds good. No further ado, continue on, Jeff.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Chair, we'll move on to the projection report. And so looking at later towards the end of the year, we have our next hearing, which is on November 16th. And based on the action that we just take, we will remain remote for that hearing. And there's currently 3 items listed on that. We have a project, which is the cemetery grading project, the appeal of the Grassini project, and then an addition to a site and a variance associated with that one. So that's on November 16th. Moving down, we don't have anything projected for December 21st. However, there is one item I would like to note for the Montecito Planning Commission. On December 14th, we have scheduled the traditional Planning Commission hearing body holiday luncheon. So pencil that in on your calendar because I know it's long awaited and much anticipated reunion since we haven't had that since probably 2019, I think is the last time we had one. So that's the projection report. Chair, that's all I have unless there's questions.
Any questions? Okay. It's easy to see everybody on one screen here with only 3 participants. All right. So public comments could be next if we have some. Mr. Villalobos?
Mr. Chair, all of the requests I've received thus far have been for items on our standard agenda. But if anyone present would like to speak on anything not on today's agenda, just go ahead and raise your hand virtually in Zoom and I'll call on you. I'm not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we move to number 9, Planning Commissioner's informational report. Donna, you want to go first or Bob, either one?
Yeah, I just have a short info item regarding Hammond's Meadow, which was before us as far as a restoration project in about 4 years ago, actually, I think.
Yeah.
Nearly. And I spoke with Mr. Tuttle and it's still going forward. It's just changed a bit. And I had some community members ask me the other day about there didn't seem to be anything happening there on the meadow. So it is going forward. It's just not immediate at this time. There's some things that need to be worked out, and that's my only briefing I have informationally.
Okay, Bob?
I have nothing to report.
Yes. I don't either. So I think we'll just move on then. And we have minutes, we have minutes from July 20th, August 17th, and September 12th should be considered. I don't know how we missed, I guess, August 17th didn't get included before, but anyway, looking at those minutes, how do you want to proceed with that? You want to just go one at a time or?
Yeah, that would be my.
Appropriate? Yeah, okay, well, let's go with the oldest one, July 20th. Okay. I see that we had 4 people at our meeting, and we all recall that one. So is there any comments by anybody?
Nope.
Okay, so then, so we have a vote for approval of these minutes or not?
Yeah, I so move to approve the the hearing minutes of July 20, 2022.
Okay, I got a second, Bob?
Motion.
Okay, David, you want to take a vote?
Commissioner Kupiec,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanauer,
Aye.
Chair Palice.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, looking at the hearing on August 17th, another short, 4 of us again. Does anyone have any comments on this thing or any modifications or they want to offer?
Yeah, thank you. In the standard agenda, number 1, Highway 101 widening, in the action number 3, was attachment I, David, was that included in, how do we reference that?
I'm not sure what you're asking me. So it's included as part of the action letter, but it wasn't an attachment to the
Right.
minutes, no.
Okay, so as far as the language of the resolution, that's,
So I would
No.
say it's attachment I to the staff report. That's
okay,
how I would reference that.
okay. And that can be referenced at that hearing on August 17th, correct?
Sorry,
The
it should-
action letter.
It should be, the way we typically do it is we reference it with the date of the actual staff report on it. Because if you look at staff reports, it says staff report, hearing date, and then date of the staff report. And so I can look that up and just add that if you like.
That would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, happy to do so.
Thank you. That's my only adjustment.
Okay. Bob, you have any?
Nope, we're good. I would move that we accept the minutes
Okay,
of August 17th,
okay. We have a second,
2022,
please.
With the amended language.
with the amended language. as
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
Second.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. D.
Commissioner Kupiak,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanauer,
Aye.
Chair Palice.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, so the special hearing of the 12th, we need to approve that. I assume there's not a lot to that. If no comment, I'd like to have a
Okay, I so move to accept the special hearing meeting minutes of September 12, 2022.
all right, we have a second.
I will second that motion, even though I was absent.
Oh, okay.
Is that legal?
No.
If I second it, is that going to be enough? I
Or do
guess,
we have to bring this to the next meeting?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess so.
If you want, we can wait until Susan gets here.
All righty. Well,
There you go.
we're getting lean and mean here. All right, so that's all of the minutes we could talk about, I guess. Moving on. Director's report is Ms. Plowman here today?
Morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Great.
Good. Good. So a few things that I want to talk to you about today. There is going to be a planning commissioner training that's going to be sponsored by the Institute for Local Government. It's on February 17th, and I think it's going to be in our board conference room. So I wanted to alert the planning commissioner members that that was going to be occurring. We are working to see if we can get free entrance to our planning commission, since we're giving them the room. So I'll keep you posted on that, but if there's an interest on anyone's part, and I'd like to pass this on to Commissioner Miller, maybe David, you and I could coordinate on that. Because he's a newer commissioner, it might be something of interest to him.
Is there a time yet?
There is not a time yet. I don't have that.
Okay, thank you.
I suspect it'll start in the, 8 or 9 in the morning or something like that. I'll keep you posted.
Just a one day, half a day, whatever it is.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds good.
And I think they do a good job on their trainings. So it'd probably be worthwhile if you have an
Mhm.
interest. Also, I'm sure you've read that the governor is going to be ending the state of emergency for COVID at the end of February. And what that likely means for the planning commission, this planning commission, is that we will be having to go back in person after that date. So we're gonna start talking internally about what all that looks like. We will still have Brown Act changes that were approved under AB 2449. And that does allow remote testimony without posting your address, but only for just cause. So that means maybe you're caring for somebody who has an illness, or there's some other substantial reason why you cannot attend in person. So that can only be done 20% of the meetings in a given year. That amendment to the Brown Act starts January 1 and 2023 and lives for 3 years, would end in I guess it's, yeah, no, yeah, and then it'll end in 2026.
Is that the only modification to the Brown Act?
So far, that's the modification. Aside from the AB 361, which was the state of emergency modification, which will remain, so that if there is a state of emergency at some point, we can utilize that section that allows for the telecommuting. But once the governor ends the state of emergency, I've been in conversation with council about it. We think that will end our ability to be remote unless something else were to occur.
And as far as remote with the public, how is that?
They'll be able to, we can still do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can still have remote public testimony, and we can still have, I think, I'll double check this with council. We could still have a commission member post where they're going to be and be remote, but it has to be posted and open to the public.
Thanks.
And then just in terms of, we've got a lot coming up on the board. So November is going to be quite busy. They only have 2 meetings. We have 2 cannabis appeals on November 1st. One is retail appeal, the Roots retail appeal, and then the Nahui Farms. We have a map and Orcut house sale on October 29th. I'm sorry, November 29th. And what you're hearing today is the child care related ordinance amendments. That will be at the board on the 29th of November. And then we are also updating our building code. So our architects on the commission, Commissioner Kupiak, there's an update to the code, and that's going to be going to the board on November 29th, and then there'll be a second reading on December 6th. And then also another LRP item, which is the land use element amendment regarding updating information about disadvantaged communities. The Summerlin Association Fuel Depot sign appeal and the series cannabis appeal will all be going on 12/13. And then there will be a CREF. We can't call it CREF anymore because I don't know if TIA CREF said we infringed on their name. So we are calling it CRIMF. But that is going to the board sometime in December. We haven't settled on a date yet, but that's just an update about where we are with the fees and whatnot. So if you're interested in that, that's an opportunity to monitor that hearing. And I think that's all I have for today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
None from.
Right.
Right.
So you're saying that we will probably be back to in person by the March phase of our meetings? Is that right? Or
Yes. Unless something unforeseen happens, but
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your report. Go ahead, Donna. You got something?
I'm sorry. I have, is PC meeting in person? What is this? When did they are, and that decision was what, a couple months ago? So they have public via Zoom and they're all
Yep.
in the room.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they
Thank you.
started, they wanted to go back in the summer and we had to go remote for a little while when the case rate got pretty high there with Omicron. But they're back in person.
Okay, thank you.
And sometimes the North County commissioners participate from the North County location hearing room, which can be done sometimes, but we don't have that issue necessarily here with MPC,
Let's hope not.
right?
Okay.
You're also right.
Yeah, we're circling the moon and we'll be back. No. Okay, so no other questions, Bob? You good?
We're
Yeah.
good.
Thank you for your report. It's always fun to listen to our director. Fun's probably not the word, but interesting. Okay.
Have a good time today.
All right. Bye-bye. So going on beyond that, David, we have the waive public hearing is on here. So
So this is just Mr. Chair, this is a waive public hearing for the Blue
Right.
Water Trust AC units at 1655 Fernald Point Lane. It's just a noticing requirement.
Yeah.
There's no action for the commissioners to take, but I did notice that the planner is here if anyone had any questions about it.
mhm. So are we gonna wait on the rest of these, or are we gonna go through these first? What was your wish, Jeff? We're gonna,
Mr. Chair, I say we can move to the consent item. It's on as consent, so you could take a motion, or if a commissioner wants to discuss it, we can pull it off consent and read it in the record and have a discussion on it. And then we'll move into item 3, the continuance on the standard agenda.
okay. So this C1, the Montecito Debris Net Annual Maintenance Report, can that go by consent, or does anybody have any questions?
No questions. I'd like to just comment on the thoroughness of the report and going forward, how it's part of the global approach to potential flooding and debris flow. So in the whole portfolio of mitigation, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, why don't I
Yes.
just read that into the record really quick before we decide
That'd be
to
appropriate.
take an
Go
action
ahead.
on it? The following is a request of the Planning and Development Department that the Montecito Planning Commission receive and file the Montecito Debris Nets Monitoring and Maintenance Report per condition number 31 of the approved project case number 19 DVP 36.
Okay, I would also, before we vote, likewise say I'm very impressed with their report, and I'm look forward to what they may guide us to in the future if we need more nets, which I'm sure we do. Anyway, David, do you want to take a vote on this? Or shall we
Just-
motion?
If the commission wants to go there, certainly, I just want to point out that we did not receive any public comment on this.
Okay, so we do not need a vote then?
Oh, no, we should vote,
do.
take a vote for, to receive and file the
What I thought.
report.
Okay, so,
Yeah, I so move to receive and file the Montecito Debris Net Annual Maintenance Report.
okay.
I would second that.
All right, so David, receive and file, would you like to take our vote?
Yes, Commissioner Kupiec,
Aye.
Commissioner Senauer,
Aye.
and Chair Police.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, so we move to number 4, zoning ordinance and amendment package.
I
Chair,
think,
Chair and Commissioners, if we could do number 3, I apologize, 3 first, which is the continuance. Well, if we,
You did
Well,
say that, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, the Airline Highway Fund LLC, new residents.
oh, right, let me read that into the record. The following is a hearing on the request of Airline Highway Fund LLC for approval of permit case number 21 CDH 31 and to accept negative declaration 01 ND3 as adequate environmental review pursuant to section 15162 of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Okay, so there a motion to extend this to the next hearing? Is that our request?
Good morning, Chair Police and members of the commission. This is Chris Schmuckel, the planner. Yes, that is our request. We're hoping to move it to November 16th, the next Montecito Planning Commission date, to resolve some issues that were brought up with public comment on Friday. So we hope to bring back the project and have the issues finalized before we come back.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I would so move to grant the continuance.
Just hold on one sec. So we actually do have public comment on this one.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, before, just let me know when you're ready to go there. But I do want to just kind of ask you whether or not you would be restricting public comment to the request for continuance, or if you're going to allow comments on the merits of the project.
You know, I would prefer that we hold the merits. We have a full, potential commission. And since it's be the next meeting, let's hold off on that, except does anybody have any comment regarding the continuance only?
Okay, so we do have a few people here who have signed up to speak. Some may just be listening. I'll start with those who have their hand raised, but I'll call on you, and if you don't want to make a comment at this time, just say so. That's fine. So our first speaker will be Kim Johnson, to be followed by Brandon Royon. Ms. Johnson.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. I did submit a letter and there was several questions and concerns contained therein. Since submitting my letter on Friday, I've been contacted by the architect representative and the owner themselves, but no one from the Planning Commission. I would really appreciate in this next month before the next hearing to receive the responses to my letter in writing. So first off, there's a public record of those responses. Secondly, so I could take those responses and share them with other experts in the field. My main questions, and I encourage you guys to read my letter in advance of the next hearing as well. I have several questions and concerns regarding this Tier 1 designation of this project, which is much lower than the proposed square footage of the project. Tier 1 is under 499 square feet. This project is over 14,000 square feet. I have no idea how it got designated as Tier 1. Therefore, the stormwater BMPs that are being suggested are not sufficient to the needs of this project.
You know, I hate to interrupt you, but I think we should just maybe allow the county team to have a little more time. And we have 4 weeks, and so let's just allow ourselves. But I appreciate your letter, and the county, I'm sure, will respond in writing soon.
Great. Could you guys maybe ask them formally to respond in writing? I think the more information we have on this, the better. And I think another issue was just kind of inconsistencies in the information that was presented, available on the website before this meeting, and then what had been available to neighbors via the architect was conflicting information. I want to make sure we're all looking at the same information for you guys as well as us, and that we can be, doing our due diligence on making sure these stormwater plans are in line.
That sounds good. We shall.
Great, thank you so much.
Chair Police and members of the commission, staff will prepare a memo responding to public comment before the next hearing.
Okay. Thank you. Any more, David?
Yes. So our next, I apologize, I didn't wear my glasses today. Our next speaker will be Brandon Royon, to be followed by Valerie Royon.
Hi. I agree with Kim that there needs to be, I appreciate you guys looking into this, and thank you for your help. I think where this house is being planted is on top of a culturally sensitive area.
Oh, Brandon, pardon me, but you're having echo. Could you turn off whatever else you have on?
Yes, thank you.
You must have two.
Yeah, 1 second. Okay.
Bye.
All right, is that better?
Yes,
Yeah, you're fine.
Wonderful, thank you. So what I was saying is, thank you for looking into this. This is, we really appreciate your help. This is really important. I think for the city, because it's, they're trying to put something on top of a culturally sensitive area. I don't know if you knew that or not.
yeah, we're going to discuss that at the next
Yeah,
hearing.
sorry. But anyways, okay, well, I'll just address that. I agree. It'd be great to look into this and I really appreciate your help.
Okay, we will do our best.
Okay, cool.
All right, she lowered her hand, but Valeria Royan, did you still wish to speak on this? Oh, she left. All right. Our next speaker will be Harry Rabin, to be followed by Kim Johnson.
Yeah, hi, this is Harry here. It's the same thing. It's all about getting information and not at the last minute on this continuance. And we have the same exact issues living in proximity to this property with a creek that has a sensitive environment, including now there's a monarch butterfly population there as well that's going to be affected by any kind of water over exceeding the normal amount that would come into that stream because of the enormity of that roof on that property and how they're draining it. So I understand it's a continuance. We'll take it up on the 18th, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Rabin.
All right, thank you. So I realize that Kim Johnson already spoke, but I see that we have two Kim Johnsons in the meeting, which leads me to believe that maybe the invite was shared. Ms. Johnson, is there someone else that wanted to speak?
I might have shared it with my neighbor Jacob Tell, so maybe that's who it is.
Oh, okay. Mr. Tell, are you there? Are you wanting to speak on this item?
No, same basic premise as the previous speakers that I support, but yeah, just basically having all the same information would be fantastic. So thank you for providing that for us in the coming days.
Great. Thank you
Yes.
for attending. I appreciate that.
So I want to ask the question, could we produce this information in the next couple of weeks? Staff?
Commissioner, through the chair, yes, we believe we have the information that's required, and we worked with the architect to make sure that we can get everything finalized in the next couple of weeks and make it available to everybody prior to the commission meeting.
Okay, that's swell. All right, thank
Okay.
you.
One last speaker, again, let's just try. Valeria Royan has her hand up again. So, Mr. Royan?
Hello. I just wanted to agree with all of the neighbors here that we just all need to be on the same page. We've received information from numerous sources. It's coming in from all angles, and it's just gotten a little bit confusing. So if we could consolidate everything and everyone be on the same page, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Royan was our last speaker on this item.
Oh, so she was the last speaker?
Yes, Mr. Royan was our last speaker. So
Okay.
I think
All right,
that
so-
ready for commissioner deliberation and a motion if someone wants to make one.
Yes. Do I have a motion for continuance? Yes.
Yeah,
no?
I so move that item 321 CDH 31 be continued until our November 16th hearing.
Okay,
I second that motion.
thank you. We take a vote, please.
Commissioner Kupiak,
Aye.
Commissioner Senauer,
Aye.
Chair Police.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, moving on to Mr. Wilson's favorite topic, number 4, zoning ordinance amendment package.
Chair Police, I think can we request a couple minutes for staff setup?
We can, and you'll be granted. Thank you. All right. We need 5 minutes or,
That would be plenty.
okay, thank you.
All right, we're back on the air whenever you're ready to start the next item, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the zoning ordinance amendments package. Can we begin with staff report?
Before we get to that, why don't I read it into the record?
That'd be even better.
All right, thank you. The following is a hearing on the request of the County of Santa Barbara Planning and Development Department for the Montecito Planning Commission to consider recommending that the Board of Supervisors adopt ordinance case number 22 ORD 5, determine that the ordinance case number 22 ORD 5 is exempt from the provisions of CEQA pursuant to sections 15061B3 and 15265 of the state guidelines for implementation of CEQA. Adopt ordinance case number 22 ORD 6 and determine that the ordinance case number 22 ORD 6 is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to section 15061B3 of the state guidelines for implementation of CEQA. A lot of work.
Okay.
Well, good morning, Chair Kupiak and Commissioners. Again, for the record, my name is Karina Venegas, and today I will be presenting the proposed child care facilities and minor ordinance amendments for your Commission's consideration. In September of last year, the Board requested Planning and Development staff to prioritize and prepare zoning ordinance amendments that would include provisions and incentives for the development of child care facilities. Accordingly, staff prepared amendments to update existing family daycare home regulations to comply with state law changes, introduce a low-level permit option for smaller daycare centers of 50 children or less with a land use permit, relax existing development standards for daycare centers in or at a public or quasi-public facilities used for assembly uses, such as schools, churches, offices, and community centers, and specified parking standards that would apply to daycare centers serving adults and children. In 2019, Senate Bill 234 amended Health and Safety Code Section 1596.78 to require a large family daycare home to be treated as a residential use of property for all purposes of all local ordinances. To comply with state law, staff revised the permit requirements for large family daycare homes serving children to allow them by right in all dwellings regardless of the zoning district, and revise the existing family daycare home glossary definitions to clarify between homes serving adults and children. In addition, staff revised the existing daycare center regulations and development standards to help incentivize childcare and reduce barriers for operators. These revised regulations would allow daycare centers serving up to and including 50 children on commercially zoned properties and residentially zoned properties operating accessory to assembly uses with an LUP. No changes are proposed to daycare centers operating as an accessory to a dwelling, which would remain subject to a conditional use permit. Currently, a CUP is required to allow a daycare center as a principal use in non-residential zones. However, with the proposed changes, smaller daycare centers serving up to and including 50 children may be allowed with an LUP. And lastly, daycare centers would be subject to specified parking standards with the potential to request a reduction in parking spaces with the submittal of a parking study, and is subject to a minor CUP. As explained further in the proposed ordinance, the parking study would need to set forth substantial evidence to support a reduction in the required parking. For example, the daycare center involves clients that do not have access to automobiles. The proposed ordinance amendments also include minor amendments to the Mludc and Article 2 that solely affect the Montecito Community Plan area and are subject of the MPC's recommendation to the board, plus other minor amendments that will affect other areas of the county and are the subject of the County Planning Commission's recommendation to the board. The following table identifies all of the minor amendments to the zoning ordinances that the board will consider. As shown in the table on the last slide, the Mludc ordinance amendments include the following for the MPC's consideration and recommendation to the board. allow electric vehicle charging stations and hydrogen fueling stations as defined in and that comply with Government Code Section 65850.07 without a zoning permit, and to correct an error regarding rear setback requirements for certain accessory structures, that is, to delete a self-reference in the subsection. The following minor amendments to Article 2 listed on this slide are subject to the MPC's recommendation to the County Planning Commission for recommendation to the board. As you can see from this slide, in addition to the EV charging stations and hydrogen fueling stations that were already mentioned, the Article 2 amendments include a number of minor changes and correct typos and make clarifications to existing regulations. The proposed ordinance amendments to Article 2 and the MLUDC are recommended to be determined exempt from environmental review, as they would not result in any new significant impacts or increase the severity of previously considered impacts. As a result, new environmental document is required pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15061B3, 15265, and 15301P. On October 12, staff provided a memorandum to the MPC describing revisions after publishing the staff recommended Article 2 ordinance amendments. The attached memorandum sets forth the corrected ordinance language and revised recommended actions for the MPC's consideration and recommendation to the County Planning Commission. The recommendations for today's ordinance amendments can be found on page 1 through 2 of the staff report and memorandum dated October 12th. To summarize, they are to make the required findings for approval and CEQA findings found in attachment A to the staff report, to determine that proposed MLUDC and Article 2 ordinance amendments are exempt from the provisions of CEQA, and to adopt a resolution and recommend approval of the MLUDC amendments found in attachment D2, and make the recommendation to the County Planning Commission, attachment 2 to the memorandum dated October 12th, that the board adopt the Article 2 amendments. This concludes staff's presentation, and staff are available to answer any questions your commission may have. Thank you.
Any questions by anyone? So when is the process for this to be approved by the board? How far out is this?
Chair Kupiec, we are taking these amendments to the County Planning Commission on November 2nd, and then we will be taking them to the board on November 29th.
Okay, thank you. And I'm a little bit older than Mr. Kubiak, but I'll go by.
I'll take it.
My
So-
apologies. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I've been called worse. So Donna, do you have any questions? Are we good with this?
Yeah, I do have some questions.
All right.
Thank you. In our Montecito community plan area, how many of these large and small childcare homes or facilities do we have existing?
Commissioner Senhauer.
Vis-a-vis the county, I guess I'm referencing the county, and in our coastal zone, within our parameters. Do we have a metric, a number that is existing at this time?
Commissioner Senhauer, through the chair, I don't have that data readily available, but I can work with DevRev staff and GIS to pull that together and send it later, if that would be okay with you.
Yeah, so it isn't, I should have asked this before, so you could have looked up the data, but we do have existing, would you say, or not?
Commissioner Senhauer, through the chair, we do have existing. I'm just not sure how many we do have currently in the coastal zone or within countywide.
Okay.
But some of that, I'm sorry.
No.
I was gonna say, some of that permitting is conditional that in a commercial zone, that it's attached to a I'm sorry, what's the language of having a senior moment? A place of assembly. We don't have many. I mean, All Saints, maybe. I'm just
Right.
trying to think of, I mean,
Right.
and this-
So
this
my
ordinance-
question was residential.
Right.
Since
wanna-
that's, yeah,
I want to be clear that this really doesn't change our laws about childcare units that are happening within residential structures. That's kind of the same. This amendment isn't really affecting that. That's
is
a
that,
question.
Ms. Venegas is, but the principal use definition would be changing, is that not correct? It would be included in, okay, I need some clarity on that
Yeah.
because it's language that kind of goes back and forth about accessory, principal use, now a residential, say a single family dwelling, which has a principal use, now can have a commercial operation of childcare, but that would be included in the principal use category. Is that okay? I just need some clarity on that.
Commissioner Senhauer through the chair. So for your example with a single family as a principal use, it wouldn't necessarily be a daycare center, comma, principal use. It would actually be a daycare center accessory to a dwelling, which would require a CUP. So that
Right.
type of
Okay.
yeah, that would fall
Okay.
into a different category.
Right, still requires.
Okay, so, right, so in all these amendments, the language kind of goes back and forth, if you know what I mean. It's kind of hard to tease that out. So that's good. So I understand that. Thank you. The category of large vis-a-vis small, which doesn't always detail, you said 50 for small, and what would large be?
Commissioner Senhauer through the chair. So the option for an LUP would be up to 50. That could occur in a residential zone, but it would have to be an accessory to an assembly use. Anything above 50 would require a CUP. So similar to kind of what's already existing, we're just now adding
Right.
the opportunity for an LUP for like a smaller center up to 50 children, which would most likely be
Okay.
close to 5,000 square feet.
Okay. And for the LUP vis-a-vis a CUP, neighborhood compatibility, could you go into the language with that? An LUP vis-a-vis a CUP. Is neighborhood compatibility a condition or something that could be basically discussed if one of these centers basically is applied for within a residential, I'm talking about residential, and an LUP vis-a-vis a CUP. I understand the CUP does effectuate a neighborhood compatibility concerns. So I'm just trying to tease out an LUP and what determinations, community determinations would be considered vis-a-vis a CUP. Am I confusing, or do you understand what? Okay, so what is this? Okay, right. Okay.
Commissioner Senhauer through the chair. Yeah, so if you can see by this slide, so with an LUP, it would still have to comply with the Montecito Community Plan policies, and then also conform with the development code. And then for a conditional use permit, you'll see that the findings would also have to comply with additional community plan area, and then also development code and so on.
Okay, so the CUP is for the large daycare, is that correct?
That is correct.
That category?
Yes.
Okay.
So 51 and up, and then
Right.
also if it's a principal use in other zones, yeah.
Right.
I have a question there. So on this land use permit, if a neighbor, for example, has wants to have a hearing, is that possible to request one?
via appeal, they could appeal the decision.
Okay, all right.
Oh, go ahead, Chair Police, you have another question? Yeah.
No, I was just curious if we have some knowledge of this, or say somebody does, and before this thing even gets off the ground, could someone, cause a public hearing for an open discussion, whether to the merits of this location? So I guess you're saying they can appeal, but that's after they've been granted a permit?
Yes, Chair Palicha, this is Dan Clement. You can't see me, not only because the table's up there, but even if it wasn't up there, you can see me because I'm on the side of the room. But just to answer your question, so to clarify, land use permits are subject to public notice and a public
Right.
comment period.
Right.
They're not typically subject to a public hearing unless the decision on the permit is appealed. At that point, you would be able to consider it on appeal,
Right.
but it's not typically subject to a hearing.
So,
Yeah, that's pretty much how everything is. You answered my question and I answered myself, I guess. All right, I'm good with this.
so
Go ahead.
noticing, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Donna.
So noticing is effectuated both with an LUP and a CUP, correct? Within neighbors within the 300-foot determination, is that correct? Your noticing placard would go out or not?
Yeah, Commissioner Senhauer, through the chair. Yeah, so the noticing is a little bit different because, for example, for CUPs, we have hearing noticing
Right.
requirements. But with regard to the notice of the decision, yes, the decision goes out to the neighbors. They also must post the placard on the property site.
Okay.
The standard conditioning for, standard noticing for land use permits.
Okay, and in the coastal zone, in Article 2, the noticing would be the same, and if it was located in the appealable zone, that would then trigger the Coastal Commission, perhaps depending. Is that correct? So if it's appealable to the Coastal Commission, that's so noted. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Commissioner Senhauer, through the chair, yeah, you're stepping into the quagmire of the appeal process for coastal development permits or CDPs. But generally, this is the way it works. Coastal development permits that are not subject to a hearing are subject to noticing that is similar to a land use permit, but there's an additional requirement that property occupants within 100 feet of the project site are also noticed in addition to the owners within 300 feet. If a project is appealable to the Coastal Commission, and there's a couple of different scenarios in which that could occur, those cases are also subject to hearing notice requirements for the hearing that is associated with the projects. And the types of projects that are subject to appeals are those which are located within the mapped geographical appeals area of the coastal zone, or they are not a principally permitted use on the
Correct.
property.
So that's my horns of the dilemma, okay? Because principal uses and accessory are getting conflated. Is that not correct with this within the coastal zone? Am I not following this correctly?
Commissioner Senhauser, through the chair. I don't know what's being conflated, but what we do, what we cannot change is the fact that if a daycare center is considered accessory,
Right.
then it's not considered a principally permitted
Okay.
use. That will be a appealable coastal development permit. I want to make it clear, though, that the state law did exempt certain categories of family daycare homes, not centers. So those operate a little bit differently because they are exempt from certain permit requirements. But you are generally getting it correct, I think, at this point.
So in that the county seems to be streamlining a lot of projects with waivers and only with appeal of or concerns of neighbors that appeal within a certain period of time, 10 days, is that correct? Are we going to see waivers before us vis-a-vis a full project before us? We see a lot of waivers popping up, and just wondering if that's part of a streamlining that we might see here also.
Yeah, Commissioner Sandhauser through the chair. That is an option. Somebody could always request a waiver, be at your commission's discretion as to whether or not you would grant that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Well, it'd be a staff
All right.
decision, but.
All right, thank you, Dan. That's all I have right now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so Mr. Villalobos, I think it's, do you have any other comments from anybody else?
Just parking. Could you go over the parking allowances, requirements to both small and large, please? I know there was a drive up and drop off in one of the to mitigate parking. Anyway, oh, here we go. Thank you. One space for 10 children, adults, and one drop off. Okay. Thank you for the language. I appreciate that on slide 7. Thank you. Yeah, I have no further comments. Thank you.
Okay. So, do we have a motion to consider?
Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure that we address public comment before we make any motions here.
I thought we did. Okay. All right. Yes, public comments. Do we have any?
Mr. Chair, I did not have anyone sign up for public comment on this particular item, but as always, I would like to give people who are present the opportunity to raise their hand on this item, and I will call on you if you wish to speak. And I don't see any hands, so I think that we're good to say we don't have any comment on this item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. So I would like to ask if we have a motion on our zoning ordinance amendment package.
I would move that we accept the staff recommendation to accept the zoning ordinance proposals as proposed.
Okay.
They seem fine.
Do I have a second, please?
I have a second. Do we need to clarify in the emotion Article 2 as 05 ending in an 05 and 06? Do we have to recommend separately?
Mr. Chair, staff put the recommendations on the, they should be on the screen now. So as long as you follow that, we should be good.
Looks like we're packaging them together here.
All right, do we need to read this? Do we need to read this into the minutes?
You can just reference it, the staff
All right.
report.
Okay. Staff report on page 13, the recommendations to require the findings for approval. They're in front of us here. Determine that the 22 ORD 5 and 202 ORD 6 are exempt from provisions of CEQA, and third, to adopt resolutions recommending approval of attachment C, D, and D-2 to the staff report dated October 11th, 2022, and attachment 2 to October 12th memorandum from the staff. If that's sufficient, then we could take a vote on that.
Do we have a second?
Bob, did you second?
Seconded.
Okay. Mr. Villalobos?
Commissioner Kupiec,
Aye.
Commissioner Senauer,
Aye.
Chair Palice,
Aye.
motion passes 3-0.
Thank you. Okay. Are we ready to move on to our original number 1, Horn Pool and Sports Court?
Commissioners,
That
we
where
just
you are?
need 2 minutes to get the staff, the PowerPoint up.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. 2 minutes you have.
Mr. Chair, I think staff is ready to proceed.
Okay.
Commissioners, this is Travis Sewers, Deputy Director. I just wanted to take a second to introduce Veronica King, who this is her first item at Montecito Planning Commission.
Oh, we'll try to be gentle.
Then thank you.
All right. So before we get started, let me read the item into the record. The following is a hearing on the request of Jeff and Gretchen Horn, property owners, to consider case number 21 CDH 23 and to determine that the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15303E of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act. Before staff gets started, Mr. Chair, did the commission have any ex parte to declare on this item?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead, Donna.
Thank you. Yeah, I met with the planner and the applicant on site. I believe it was yesterday. And I also met with a neighbor, Ms. Bush, who lives across the creek from the applicant's residence. Thank you.
Okay, I likewise visited the site with Veronica and the applicants and acknowledged seeing the backyard but you mentioned I was going to get some clarification if I could. Maybe I can ask that question later regarding the location of the neighbor's complaint location. Was there a structure between the creek and the applicant, or is actually Kim, was it Miss Bush is on the other side of the creek? So I'm just want to get some clarification, but we can ask that question later. So let's proceed. I don't think, Bob, were you there?
I was not there.
Okay, so that should cover it. David? So should the staff proceed? Veronica, are you there?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Veronica King, and I will be presenting the proposal for the Horn Pool and Sports Court project. This is an aerial view of the proposed project site. The subject property is outlined in red. It is located at 128 Santa Elena Lane, nearby Highway 101 and Montecito Creek. The property is a 0.47 acre parcel, zone 20 R1, and it's currently developed with a single-family dwelling and a detached garage. And next, we'll see the site plan. The project is a request for a coastal development permit to allow for the installation of a swimming pool approximately 19 by 38 feet with an inset spa. The pool, shown on the site plan in blue, will be located east, so that's behind the existing single-family dwelling. Also proposed is the legalization of an existing sports court that was built without permits, shown here in green. The dimensions are 25 by 24 feet, and the court includes a basketball hoop of 12 feet in height. No removal of any native vegetation or specimen trees is proposed, and no modifications to the existing single-family dwelling are proposed. All of the structural development related to the swimming pool and spa is proposed outside of the required setbacks. The sports court is located partially within the rear setback, as allowable by ordinance, and within the 50-foot buffer from the top of bank of Montecito Creek, which requires approval of a buffer reduction. The top of bank of the creek is delineated with the black dashed line to the far right, and the 50-foot buffer is measured to the left of that line. And next, we'll see another aerial with these project elements shown. Figure 2 is taken from the bio report. The drip lines of oak and sycamore trees on the property are highlighted by the yellow and pink solid lines. The 50-foot buffer from Montecito Creek to the northeast is shown as a dashed green line. Per recommendations from the biologist, the pool has been relocated outside of the drip line of a sycamore tree. As you can see on this aerial, there is an intervening parcel between the subject lot and the creek. And next we'll see photos. These photos show the as-built sports court. The photo on the left is a close-up of the sports court and fully extended basketball hoop. The center photo is the view looking west towards the existing single-family dwelling. And the photo on the right was taken from the rear patio facing east. The project is consistent with all applicable Article 2 zoning requirements, is consistent with the purpose and intent of the R1 zone, and with height and setback requirements. The sports court is allowed within the rear setback pursuant to Section 35-210 of Article 2, which allows an accessory structure to be located in the rear yard, provided it does not exceed a height of 12 feet and does not take up more than 30% of the rear yard setback. The project is also consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the coastal land use plan and the Montecito community plan. There are adequate services available to serve the development. The project is in conformance with the scale and character of the surrounding community, as pools and sports courts are both commonplace and allowable by ordinance. The project will not change the visual character of the site and will not be viewable from or along the coast. Policy Bio M 1.8 in the Montecito Community Plan mandates a 50-foot setback from the top of bank of the creek. Although the sports court portion of the project is located within this 50-foot setback, the policy allows for adjustments to the buffer on a case-by-case basis if warranted by a site's physical conditions. A biological assessment was prepared by Mludc to assess potential impacts and policy consistency. Mludc found that a buffer reduction of 20 feet would be appropriate, as the sports court has a negligible effect on water quality, riparian habitat, and ESH. Between the top of bank and the subject property, no native ground cover exists, and another fully developed property separates the creek corridor from the subject lot with intervening hardscape and ornamental landscaping. the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the California Regional Water Quality Control Board concurred with the biologist's recommendation for a buffer reduction. Therefore, staff supports the request for a buffer reduction. The proposed project can be found categorically exempt from environmental review pursuant to Section 15303 of the Guidelines for CEQA. Section 15303 exempts the construction and location of limited numbers of new small facilities or structures, including accessory structures such as swimming pools and sports courts. Given that the proposed project is for the construction of a swimming pool and for the validation of an as-built sports court, the project can be found exempt under CEQA. Staff recommends that your commission make the required findings for approval of the project, determine the project is exempt from CEQA, and grant approval of the project subject to the conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation. Staff is available for questions.
All right. David, do we hear from the applicant or do we have questions ourselves first?
Mr. Chair, you're welcome to ask any questions of staff, or you, depending on the question, they could be more appropriate for the applicant. Just depends on what they are.
Right. Yesterday when I was there, I noticed there, Commissioner Sinara exposed the fact that there was lights that were hanging, it's seemingly kind of high on the boundary of your neighbor's property and on the back. Is that something that's needed for the basketball, or because if it was for a party situation, they might be lower? So just curious on how you propose to use those higher lights.
The string lights?
Yeah.
Those are currently inoperable. We have unplugged those and they're not working at the moment, but we have used those in the past to just for a decorative occasion and just
not for basketball.
No, not for basketball.
Okay. That answers that question. And then your neighbor that's closest to you. I didn't see any comments from them. Have you had discussions with them about your project?
Yes, and they are fully supportive. They had one question in the very beginning when this started about 18 months ago about the location of the pool equipment, but we got those questions and concerns answered, and they are fully supportive and on board.
Okay. Of the staff, Victoria, or is that right? Not Victoria. Yeah.
Veronica.
Veronica. I knew it was a V there somewhere. Okay. Was there comments? I was looking at the information rendered and I was wondering, did flood control have any comment at all? I spoke briefly to Walter at flood control, and we lost contact. So I'm just curious, was there any comments in here from flood control? Is it all by the biologist? Veronica?
Yes, they've reviewed the project and issued a condition letter, which is attached to the back of attachment B with the staff report.
Oh, okay. That got by me. All right. Well, that's good. Bob, you have any questions, or Donna at this time?
Well, my only question is, I know you guys have a title report. I go, that there's an ESHA there. I mean, the normal procedure is to get a permit when you're building inside a sensitive habitat zone. I mean, how does this happen? How do people go forward building an entire construction project knowing that they're in a restricted area?
Hey, Chair and Commissioners, I recommend that if we want to ask questions to the applicant, let them do the presentation, then we can ask questions of them. They may be able to answer the questions during their presentation if they have one.
Sure.
Are you ready for that? Donna and Bob, you want to hear from the applicant?
I have questions. However, I prefer having the applicant go forward at this time.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Let's go forward with the family.
Okay, so I guess we'll just try to answer that question. Our neighborhood, as I'm sure you're all aware, was severely impacted by the debris flow in 2018, and all of our landscape in the front and the back, the entire property was covered in 3 feet of mud, and we really just wanted to get back into the house. Our boys at the time were 10 and 11 years old and really traumatized and affected by what we went through. And we honestly just wanted to get them back in here. They were worried about coming back, and we thought we'll add a basketball hoop in the backyard, make it fun for them, make it a place they want to come back to and they feel safe. And we just move forward. And so that is how the sport court ended up where it was.
Patio.
So you applied for this pool. How long ago did you apply for this pool? A year and a half ago?
We started the process, I think, last May or June 2021, and we added the sport court onto the plan so that we could get it
Legal.
permitted and in compliance.
So let me ask you, well, there was a patio there that got covered with mud, and you basically just expanded the patio, saw cut it, and made it a flat, usable surface because it was damaged to some extent?
It was damaged. We had a conversation set out there before the debris flow with a little fire pit, and that was all sort of swept away and heavily damaged. So once we uncovered everything, which took quite some time, we decided just to add on to that little area and add a basketball hoop.
Right. So instead of waiting while your kids grew up, while they're still traumatized, you decided to take matters in your own hands, despite the fact it was inconsistent with our permit process. I understand that. And the county has spoken to you about it, and I guess you've asked for forgiveness and they've accepted it, and we're moving forward. Is that how you understand it?
That is how we understand it, yes.
Okay. Okay. Is there more you want to say about your project?
No, I think Veronica did a great job and covered everything.
Okay. Commissioners?
Yeah, I have some, thank you to the applicants. And I have some questions. I visited the site yesterday. And as I said, I also visited the neighbor who is basically at a diagonal across the creek, who I believe we will hear, I'm not sure if they're on, but we do have a letter of that they did submit regarding some concerns. But back to the project site, which is number one, the existing play structure. Is that within the buffer zone also? I understand from the applicant that it was existing. But that is staff, is that not a part of this consideration of this project? Is that correct?
Backing staff.
That was existing when we, oh, sorry, you asking Veronica, not us?
Right.
Sorry.
Veronica, as the quote sports court was existing, but there's no consideration of the existing play structure. Is that correct? And why is that?
Are you still with us?
Yes, commissioners, we're just conferring for 1 second.
Okay.
Through the chair, Commissioner Senauer, the play structure, can you describe, is it a swing set that you're describing, or?
No, it's quite a significant, do we have an aerial, a Google? I thought we did, where that was shown, maybe not. I thought we had somewhere in our packet, we have photos. Can someone reference them? Can we put them up or not? Veronica, I'm sorry. Do you know to which I am referencing? is there there is no photo of the play structure? Is that correct?
I don't see one.
Okay, Ron, you were there. You saw what
Yeah,
I was
it is-
referencing.
it was a little tree fort. What it amounts
Well,
to,
it's
it is about 8 by 8. It's very small, but it is tall and it is in the
Correct.
setback.
Correct. And I was wondering why that wasn't a consideration in this, what's before us, whereas the quote sports court, and I have a question about that, was or is, and you can see just on the right, I think that's taller than 8 feet, Ron. Which is in the buffer, the 50-foot top of the bank area, much more so than the sports court. But why that wasn't referenced as a structure that would be considered in the totality of this project before us, i.e.
By virtue of the fact it's outside of, it's inside.
And it was existing.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get, I'm just
Well,
trying to.
comments from yes, I understand.
Thank
Veronica, do you have a comment on that? Did you have any discussion with your rest of the staff about that?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Senhauer, this wasn't identified on the plans. My understanding was that it was existing, but before the current owners moved in. But I can look into that further. Get back to you.
Is a permit needed for such a structure within the setback within the 50-foot, as we're considering this sports court? Is there the same application of permitting requirements and codes, etc.? And if so, why it wasn't considered part of this? So I'll move on, okay? Thank you. I'll move on. Regarding the bio report by Dudek, when I was at the residence across the creek, I probably saw a dozen or 20 monarchs, which the whole community is seeing, which is absolutely amazing since they have been in decline for years. So it was just absolutely a delight. However, in the bio, it's under birds, and a monarch isn't a bird, but on page B1, that's wildlife species observed attachment B. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not see monarchs. This was October 21, so about a year ago. So I do think perhaps they rebounded within the past year, but I do think that's of import to the environmental and bio considerations. So I would like to highlight that I did personally observe probably a dozen monarchs, which is right in the creek and on the oaks. And they were in fact on the, west side of the creek also, where the applicant has their property. The lighting, if exists and when it is on, per code must be hooded. Is that correct? So the quote fairy lights, when they're on, for whatever reason, do they need a permit when they're on? And I assume they're only on, even though they are inoperable per the applicant at this time. When they do choose to, I take it it's after dark. I mean, you wouldn't have them probably on during the day. Is there any requirement for permitting at night with fairy lights? And if there is not, and they are on, do they need to, is there a requirement that they be hooded? So that's a question for staff. And I will get to a major concern of mine is the definition of sports court vis-a-vis flat work. And I have talked to staff about this in the past. And a sports court requires an LUP, and that's what's before us. But there's also a consideration that there is a category of flat work, which like a patio, etc. And I'm trying to tease out when a development is considered flat work vis-a-vis a sports court. And perhaps I could get some clarification on that from someone. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sinauer, this is Alex Tuttle. I'll try to respond to that. And it's complicated in this particular case because of the location. So a sports court in and of itself is not necessarily a trigger for a permit requirement. But often depending on the type of court, it might include elements that would elevate or convert it into or trigger a permit requirement, such as if there's grading to create a large flat area, or if there's a large fence or wall surrounding the sports court. So those would be what would normally trigger a permit. In and of itself, a sports court is flat work, as you pointed out, and that is not the trigger for the permit. However, they do need to comply with setback requirements, just like all other exempt structures do. And that's because of the heightened use of court as opposed to like a patio space.
Okay, so
and in this particular instance, it's not really the court that's triggering the permit, but the fact that it's located within the ESH creek buffer that's drawing attention to it. Otherwise, it would likely be exempt, but for the 12-foot tall basketball portion of the project.
okay, that's your description is complicated. And I understand that sports court vis-a-vis flat work is often interchangeable, save for grading, fencing, usage, perhaps, intended usage. And the only reason in this case, the designation is a sports court, which requires or would have required, does require permitting. The only reason that's designation is being applied here is because it's in the top of the bank within the restricted 50 feet. Is that correct? So it's being turned not flat work, but a sports court. Is that correct? And it has a basketball hoop on it.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sinauer, if I could just restate. So as I mentioned, a sports court in and of itself does not trigger a permit requirement. It's typically elements associated with a sports court that might trigger a permit, like grading, fencing, walls, etc.
Okay.
So the fact that we're calling it a sports court is somewhat immaterial to the situation here. It's functioning as a basketball play area. We could call it flat work, but the fact that it's within the ESH buffer is what's triggering the permit requirement, because even exempt structures need to comply with setback and buffer requirements. So if this same element had been in the center of their property, then we'd be having a different conversation.
And the conversation would be involved with flat work vis-a-vis sports court.
Well, again, it's not, calling it a sports court has really no impact on how we look at it from a permitting perspective.
Okay, so we just, you know, we see in MBAR, et cetera, projects before them, there's many times an LUP for a sports court. Okay, so that's conditioned on all these predicates that you laid out before, right? About grading, et cetera, et cetera. If that threshold has been met or will be met, it's the requirement is an LUP. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sennauer, if to create a sports court or patio for that matter requires greater than 50 cubic yards of
Okay.
grading, then a land use permit would be required.
Okay.
If if it involves a tall fence or wall to surround it, that would in and of itself trigger a
Okay.
permit, regardless of the use.
Okay.
But like all exempt structures, they need to comply with setback requirements.
Of course. Okay. Right now, I think I have some other comments, but Ron, why don't you go ahead, or
Yeah,
whoever?
I wanted to
Commissioners,
speak. Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Travis Sewers again. If I could just address a previous question as well about the
Okay.
treehouse.
Yes.
So what I'm being told is if a structure is 120 square feet or less, 12 feet high in height or lower, there's no electrical and no plumbing, that is considered an exempt structure. But as staff said, we have no details on when this structure or when the treehouse was put in or what the dimensions are at this point.
Even if it's within the 50-foot buffer.
So it's a small tree house does not necessarily trigger a permit just because it's an esh. If it is removing 50 linear feet of vegetation along a creek bank, removal of 5,000 square foot of vegetation. So there's parameters around it. But again, we just don't have any of that information as to when it was put in or so.
Right.
Okay. So we need to ask the applicant what information they have. Yep.
Okay, so you need the location specifics, okay, and the dimensions. Nobody's gone out there and measured anything, correct?
I don't think anybody thought they had to tell you the truth.
Right.
But I understand.
Well, whether you thought about it or not is not what's before us. It's an existing structure. So I would just like clarity on that. I don't know if you can do it now, or this has to be, you need more information before we make a determination. In any case.
Well, what exactly do you want? What information do you want? Do you want dimensions?
Yes,
height?
dimensions and exact location.
Okay.
And height.
Can the applicant go out in your backyard and measure it and tell us where it lies? Does that satisfy?
I think that would be staff. I'm sorry. I think.
Oh, okay.
And I have some further, those were questions. My comments can come later, but.
Sure. I have a question regarding the sports court designation. Does pickleball have its own designation? Because that is a veritable issue that's been popping up all over the country, and mostly because of noise issues. And so do we have any kind of designation, or is that also a sports court?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, a pickleball court has no special designation or treatment. It would be treated like any other feature, and consistent with what I was previously describing as to a pickleball court. If it doesn't require grading of exceeding 50 cubic yards or fencing or walls that would trigger a permit, then it would be, and it meets setback requirements, it would be exempt.
Okay, well, that'd be a bigger issue than this treehouse, I think, in the future. Okay, so where do we go from here?
Do we have public comment?
David, do we have public comment?
Sorry, thanks. I was waiting for you to call on that. Yes, we do have one speaker on this item.
I think Commissioner Keller is, greetings, is present and has her hand raised.
I didn't even see her present and I didn't see her hand either. So go right ahead, Ms. Keller.
Thank you. I apologize for my unavoidable lateness. I don't know if this has been covered, but I did want to ask if the sports court had what is being raised here is the fact that it's within the buffer for the environmentally sensitive habitat. Was there another location on the lot that had been considered for the sports court? Because it would appear that there's plenty of room in the area immediately behind the house, which would be, I think, south of where the proposed pool is.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Keller, before we continue or we get a response, we see that you've joined Commissioner Keller. We do want to make sure for the record that you have received all evidence. You've been monitoring the hearings. That way you can participate in this item. Yeah, I mean, if you came in late, we might need to take a break and discuss that. But we need to, for the record, we need to make clear that you have been monitoring and have received all evidence today and earlier.
Thank you for clarifying that. I wasn't sure. I thought I probably should recuse myself from the vote, but I felt that it was possible for questions since I have read all the materials that were submitted to us along with the comment letters. So could you explain, just clarify, Mr. Wilson, where that leaves me?
Well, we've had public comment, we've had the applicant's comment. So I don't know whether, if you're not going to vote, and it might be best if we continue.
We haven't had public comment yet.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I was just asking Mr. Wilson if I was entitled to even ask questions as a part of this hearing.
Commissioner Keller, through the chair, based on what you just mentioned, that you have read the staff report, you have all the information evidence that was presented today, then you can participate. If you feel that you have not had all the evidence, then I would recommend you recuse yourself and not participate. But if you can articulate that you have all evidence and can participate, then you can move forward. Mr. Pettit, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Commissioner Keller, through the chair, I don't have much to add to what Secretary Wilson said. If you are going to serve as a decision maker on the item, we should make sure that you have all the evidence, you've received all the evidence. In any event, it's fine for you to participate in asking questions to help develop the record.
Thank you. I did only intend to ask questions to make sure there was information on the record. I don't know if anybody else has asked a question about the other potential locations for the sports court. If someone could answer that, I'd appreciate it. I don't know to whom that should be directed.
Well, I think what we're looking at right now is looking at the applicant's application for approval as what's existing and the proposed pool and spa. And the county has viewed it that way and has offered this bit of information. No one has talked about relocations. So that may be an issue that comes by virtue of a negative vote or a lack of winning an appeal. But I don't think that that's in front of us, but you can still ask the question.
Thank you. It's my understanding that we have the option of conditioning the approval of the pool in some way, shape, or form. One way might be to require that they relocate the sports court. So that is why I wondered if they had considered other areas or possible locations for the sports court.
Have you been to the site?
I have not. Just looked at the plans.
All
and
right.
I see there's a large space behind the house that looks as though it would accommodate the sports court. And I wondered if considered. So no one's answering. Has anyone on staff been to the property and made that determination, or possibly the owners could make that response?
We can answer it. There is an existing patio, and that's why we put the basketball hoop there.
That's why you put the basketball court where you did.
Because we attached it, we put it on the existing patio, right?
I'm sorry. there was an existing patio where the sports court now is.
It's, yeah.
And we enlarged it, and added the basketball hoop.
Okay, thank you. So that existing patio was also encroaching on the setback, that's correct?
I'm not sure it was existing when we moved in, and it was uncovered when we moved. We had to excavate a lot of mud and debris after the debris flow, and we uncovered it there and added on to the added on to it.
Did not know it existed until you excavated.
We had a conversation area out there with a little fire pit, and we had gravel and stuff. And then once everything was excavated after the debris flow, we found there was a cement pad there.
Thank you. That was my only question. Thank you.
Well, you had a question regarding the possible alternate location, and the applicant's here now. You want to say why the location you've chosen or you've extended is apropos for the backyard, or is there any consideration of moving it?
The large grass area that looks, I think on the plans, if you haven't been to the site in person, just looking at it on the plans, it looks like there's a large grassy area that would be appropriate for a sports court, but that grassy area is right in front of our outdoor patio where we have our dining table, and we just like to look out at landscaping and grass from there, and felt that a better place for the sport court was in the rear of the property.
Yeah, okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. So do we go to the public for comment now? Is that appropriate, commissioners? Everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, David?
We have one public speaker for this item, Liz Bush.
Yeah, good morning. And is it my understanding that I'm just audio? Because I'm struggling with video settings right now.
That is correct.
Yes, it's just audio. Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. I hope you've had an opportunity to read my letter. If you haven't, I'm sorry it's a little bit long, but I attempted to, divide it in sections and provide, bullet points to kind of guide you through my line of thinking and my concerns about the project. I think it was Mr. Tuttle who mentioned earlier, if this was just about a pool, we would be having a completely different discussion, because the pool, has been adjusted, I think, really appropriately outside of, the ESH area as well as the drip lines. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about a build first, ask questions later sport court that is, the majority of it is within the setback, and also presents issues with regard to, its lighting and, other aspects of the Montecito community plan. So in my letter, I'd asked for you to only grant conditional approval of the pool with a required finding that the sport court be relocated outside of the ESH, and that there be assurances with regard to the lighting. I did want to tell you a little bit about me. I've been here my whole life. This is my family home. My grandpa bought this land, I want to say at the end of the 50s, and my dad built it as a spec house with his buddy, who was an architect, and he couldn't sell it, so he ended up moving into it. So I'm really familiar with the area. And Commissioner Senauer, your comments about the Dudek report and the monarch butterfly, I would suggest, because August is a little bit early for when the monarchs start coming through. It seems to be a later fall thing. And it's just, I'm glad that you had an opportunity to be here. I wish other people could come to this property and kind of see what life looks like from the east side of the bank. It really is a special place, and there's so much wildlife and there's so much going on that, raucous basketball, as fun as it is, and I want the kids to have fun in their lives, but this really isn't the setting for that. And especially with the lighting. The lighting has been a very big struggle. And yeah, for the last 5 nights, the lighting has been off. My gosh, it's like transformed what it's like to sit in my living room at night. And then the lighting was off, I want to say, probably for about 5 or 6 weeks after the enforcement deadline about having the lighting taken down. So yeah, the lighting has been a large concern for me, as well as, being in the ESH. So I think that's all I have to say. And I guess you can ask me questions, but thank you for listening to me.
Ms. Bush was our only speaker for this item.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. I'm curious about, I'm gonna ask the applicant this, curious about the lighting. That's seemingly new information for me. So, that lighting, the height of that lighting concerns me. And I'm curious whether or not, the county staff has got to comment themselves on whether or not that's allowable. I don't think that it is, but the fact that it's not operating now doesn't mean that you can't turn it on again. So what are your plans to, is what we just heard from the public comment consistent with your understanding?
I think Ms. Bush is implicating that there is some sort of lighting specific to the sport court, making it sound like we've got some sort of stadium lighting or something. We don't. So we have the string lights that you've seen that are up that I think
Haven't
probably
operated.
75% of our neighbors in Santa Barbara County have. They're inoperable currently. And as far as sitting in her living room and being bombarded by lights from the string lights, I just don't see how that's
Well, they haven't been on.
possible.
Well, the fact that they're up and you need them to be that high?
No, we don't need them to be that high.
Yeah, I mean, if need be, we're willing to take them all down. It's just, we made them inoperable per the request from the county. And they haven't been operable since.
Yes. Well, I guess the only question would be, if I was your neighbor, if they're not operable, but they can be operable once you get your permit granted, what's to stop you from turning them back on?
And if that's a condition to get this approved, we're happy to completely take them down.
Mhm. Okay. Well, we'll talk about that in our deliberation, but thank you. I didn't get it back to any questions? I don't see anybody's hand up. Okay. So, should we go to deliberations here? Everybody prepared for that?
Yep.
Okay, Bob, would you like to go first?
Well, I mean, I think it's unfortunate. I think that the fact that there's construction between the creek and the sports court already, and it seems that the concrete slab that was there was already in existence. I think its extension is not a tremendous problem, you know. I think string lights that bother the neighbor should probably come down, you know, but I think as far as the location of the sports court, you know, I understand why it's there. I mean, you know, somebody didn't want to put it closer to their house to take up valuable real estate property that would affect the usage of the primary building. But, you know, I don't see that the sports court in its current location is doing any great harm.
Correct. Okay. So Donna, you want to?
Yeah, thanks.
Comment?
Thanks. Yeah, I have concerns about the buffer reduction of 20 feet or more. And I think it would not be unreasonable to reconsider a different location if in fact a sports court is the sports court is something the applicant really feels they cannot live without. And so I cannot, either reducing it to where it doesn't encroach and aligning it differently are my recommendations. Regarding the existing play structure, I think there needs to be some clarity on that, since it is encroaching, just like even though it's existing, just like the sports court was, although the sports court was added on, as the applicant mentioned, to perhaps interfere with the buffer. my concern also is the bio report by Dudek that there was no considerations of monarchs, and that's probably because perhaps they weren't around in October 2021. And it probably, generally, they're just a day. They go out for a day or part of a day and do an observation. I don't have the details of that. I think I'm concerned about the buffer reduction. I think reasonable development of the parcel could in fact proceed without the sports court being in that location. Top of the bank is of great import. And as we saw with the debris flow and the flooding, the scouring, etc., and the adverse effects this whole community had, and this parcel, I think it would behoove a consideration of a smaller court and or a repositioning of the location of this court if a court is something that basically is a requirement for the applicant. They have a pool, they're going to have a pool, which the children, I think they're in their teens, would certainly enjoy. And maybe a consideration of relocation of the sports court would be my my thoughts on this. And as far as the existing play structure, I need some more information on specifics of that also. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to say from my perspective that I understand the ages of these young sons that are in high school, and they're going to be home for just a few more years and off to college. To go through a long process of reconstruction and moving that sports court, I think is ridiculous, personally. The court has no effect on the creek. That's why the comments came back in such that the county supported this sports court as it is. Their property line and all the area of their property is basically no effect on the riparian area. And that's why the exemption was allowed, because it was beyond the riparian plants and shoreline, and their lot is high ground that is inundated by a 1,000-year storm. However, I think there's an area, there's times when we need to be involved with changing conditions or offering guidance, but I think that the county got this right, that this should be exempt, this small sports court, which was formerly a patio. I don't think they're asking that much to move it and go through all these hoops of getting a new permit. These kids will probably be gone. And I know I'm taking a more personal approach, but I think it's part of our responsibility to think of, if we want to have a village, we got to act like we care about the village, and the village is the people that are in it. And I believe that this project should be approved as it's been presented. So that's my comment. I'm good with what I see out there. I do not like the lights. I think they should come down as part of a condition. And as far as the tree fort, I think that was probably more functional when the kids were younger. Knowing my kids when they were in high school, they didn't spend much time in that tree fort. So I don't know how important it is, but I'm sure that the sport court and the pool are. So I don't know what we do about that tree fort, since it's just redwood sticks that are standing up and been there for a long time. And it's a very small area, and seems the county has looked at it and given the guidelines of 12 feet. If it's within those guidelines, I think it's appropriate. Anyway, I'll say no more here. And I see Commissioner Keller has a hand up. Please
Yes.
proceed. Please proceed.
Thank you. I was going to say that I think, yes, if we're concerned about the village, that we need to be concerned about the environment that makes the quality of life in the village so special. So this is why I see a 40% encroachment into an environmentally sensitive habitat an issue. It's 20 feet out of a required 50 feet. That's a 40%, not a slight encroachment. And why do we have these rules if we are going to subsequently decide they mean nothing? I don't like the notion that we might create precedent here by saying, okay, well, 40% is okay, therefore maybe next time 45% will be okay, or let's say that 50% will be okay. These creeping standards seem to be an unfortunate occurrence, and I think we need to be respectful of what standards were created and are attempting to be upheld. I feel that the original concrete slab that was a conversation area is a far cry from a sports court where there are teenagers and lights and basketball. The comments going on. I think you should mute yourself, Chair Pliche, because your comments are being heard.
Sorry.
And I think that this is a great difference in usage. So that has to be taken into account. And I don't think it's a huge deal to relocate a perfectly flat slab of concrete because they easily expanded it into a sports court from what it was as a small piece of concrete. And I am concerned about setting the precedent and concerned about our approving this and what message it sends in terms of what our priorities are. Thank you.
We have the applicants raise their hands, Chair. We can't hear you. We
You're
can't
muted.
hear you, Ron. Okay.
All right, please, applicants, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate again that I'm not sure Commissioner Keller heard the part of the staff report that there is an entire property between our property and the creek. There is hardscaping and non-native plantings. So yes, we are encroaching on the ESH, but there is another property between our house behind us and the top of bank of the creek.
Since you allowed them to speak, I did read the staff report and I saw the letter from Ms. Bush in which that was described as a pathway. And it's unfortunate that I wasn't able to do a site visit. I appreciate your clarification. You say it's another residential property that has hardscape, and how much of that is into the ESH?
I'm not sure. That property I think has been here for quite some time. It was definitely here when we bought the property. It's not a pathway. It is a backyard of our neighbor's house behind us. And they also have little kids who use their backyard. So it's definitely more than a pathway.
Thank you. That was not clear from the combination of the staff report and the letter. Thank you.
So I want to say, if the sport court addition wasn't there, you would have your yard. It'd be continuation of your lawn. Then there's that path. Then there's the hedge. Then there's the fence. And none of those things are indigenous plants of any kind. It's ornamental landscape. And so the difference would be you'd have either a piece of concrete there that your kids get a chance to play on, or it'd be a lawn or some DG, but it would still be a flat property without any plants of any kind that would have an impact on the creek. So I agree with the county's process of approval, and I think it's despite the fact it's they're asking for forgiveness. I think if they were to come forward and ask for this particular permit process to begin in the same location, they would probably be granted it. But anyway, further comments at all by the Gretchen or your husband?
Yes, I just did want to also bring up that I feel like the process of drilling out the concrete and removing the existing sport court only to relocate it, a few feet further south towards the house would, I think, have a bigger impact in terms of noise and disruption to any wildlife and the neighbors, frankly.
So do we have any further comments from the county after hearing these comments by the commissioners and the applicants? Is there anything more that could be added?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, if I could just maybe clarify a couple things, just to clear up perhaps some confusion. The intervening parcel that has been identified and discussed in both the staff report as well as in comment today, that is owned by a different individual than Ms. Bush, who lives on the other side of the creek. So perhaps that's where the confusion lies. With regard to the lighting, string lights, while common in backyards, they are still subject to our exterior lighting requirements of being hooded or shielded to direct light downward. So if they did want to retain the string lights, they would need to comply with that requirement, or they can just be removed per your direction. And I think
The tree fort. What about the tree fort? Any more on that?
Well, I think the reason it hasn't been included as part of the project is it wasn't identified on the plans or in the application or identified by staff as part of the proposal. So it has not been evaluated. It would generally be subject to the same criteria and requirements as the basketball hoop in terms of the allowances in the rear yard and the setback requirements. But I can't speak to the height of it. We don't have that information.
That structure, the tree fort, was also in existence when we bought the house in 2013. It's my understanding that there were the owners before us and the owners before them had kids, and that was, I think, it, like the Commissioner of Police was saying, it's just a simple redwood structure. It didn't seem to us that it was needed to be added to the plans, which is why it wasn't. And if it's going to hold up the project, then we are happy to take it out if that's a requirement.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I did want to make one more comment about the monarch butterflies. So we have periodic countywide surveys of monarch sites, like roosting and aggregation sites throughout the county, and primarily along the south coast. While there perhaps may be some monarchs present in that area, this corridor of the creek is not identified as one of the known roosting or aggregation sites for monarch butterflies in terms of their overwintering habitat. So I just wanted to identify that.
Okay.
And Commissioners, if this is Travis Ewers, if I could just add one more quick thing too. In addition to having the parcel in between this residence, staff does not recommend a buffer reduction unless we have a bio report that demonstrates that there is no habitat being harmed. And so in this case, even the tree house in question would fall within the request for buffer reduction. So I just wanted to remind the Commission that we don't recommend approval of the reduction if there's bio present.
Okay. Where do we go from here? Do we have a?
Well, Ron, I just wanted to mention, if people look at the figure 2 from the DUDEC report, just to see what's beyond the sports court between the sports court and the Montecito Creek. I mean, the adjacent property is kind of fully developed up to the creek. I mean, there's an area that's kind of, in the hazard zone that's actually abutting vegetation on the creek. It's the adjacent property, not this one. So,
right.
I mean, again, I just don't think this is doing any great harm. It's not really changing the dynamic of what's there already. That's all. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with that comment. So do we have any other comments before we consider a proposal for approval or not? We have a motion. We need a motion now. David, where are we at here?
So I think that, the commission, if deliberations lead to a motion one way or the other, I'm not sure if that's where we are. I think that you should just ask for if there's any further deliberation, and if not, if anyone would like to make a motion.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more with Commissioner Sinauer regarding the treehouse. What do you propose if that wasn't an issue, or I guess if it is an issue, how do you want to deal with that? Would you recommend?
I would like additional information for the physical location and the dimensions. So it's just not we didn't see it, it's not on the plans. We need some definition as to the location, height, dimensions of that structure. I think if we got that, that would be very helpful. But that's just where I'm going. I think the plans are not complete without citing that treehouse.
Well, I would prefer that we took a vote and with the exception of that treehouse, and I don't. Okay.
The applicant seems to be willing to remove the treehouse in order to get the project approved.
And the applicant also seems to be willing to get rid of the lighting. So I'm prepared to go ahead and approve it if they remove the lighting and remove the treehouse. And I'm prepared to make a motion to that effect.
The applicant's prepared to accept that?
That's not a question you should be asking, Chair Mludc.
Well, it affects my vote if they are. So if you
Decision.
don't mind me asking the question, I will ask the question. Thank you.
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
They
All
had
right.
already indicated that they were willing to do that. That's the only reason I suggested it.
All right.
So Chair Mludc and Commissioners, depending on, I'm seeing a potential direction. Two things. We mentioned this before. If Commissioner Keller is choosing to vote, she needs to articulate for the record that she's had access to all evidence that was presented today and before. So that way she can be on the record saying that she's obtained all the evidentiary material through the presentations and or staff report, et cetera. So that would be for Commissioner Keller to be able to articulate that on the record that she can vote. If the commission wants to consider options presented as far as removing the lights and or the treehouse, I would recommend that the applicants voluntarily add that to their project description. So the project description be revised to remove the treehouse and lighting, string lights. And then that way that would be condition number 1. So the commission could approve the project with the revised conditions with the removal of the treehouse and the lights, if the applicants wanted to voluntarily amend their project description to say that.
Yes, well,
That was a twofold thing, Mr. Wilson. So because I don't wish there to be, I feel that I have been able to read all the materials and I was aware of the discussion today, but I don't want there to be any question about my ability to vote fully informed. I will recuse myself from the voting. I would just suggest that what you said in the second half of your statement about the applicants making that voluntary willingness to remove those 2 items just to clear things up, I support that. I just don't feel I should officially vote. Thank you very much. I will recuse myself.
thank you. All right. Bob or Donna, do you have a motion that we could start with?
I don't have a motion, but I support if the applicants choose to revise their project to removal of the playhouse and the lights. I would like to add, if if they could consider a reorientation of the flat work or sports court to so the buffer reduction would not be required.
Okay, well, Bob, if you want to make a motion, you may, or if
I'm certainly willing to support what Susan has proposed. That the applicant is willing, as conditions of this approval, to remove the treehouse and to remove the string lights. That I propose that we accept the balance of the project as defined in the county's submission to us as being approvable.
okay, so that's a motion that does not insist on any modification of the sports court as we know it now.
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
So Chair Pliche and commissioners, it'd be a good practice if we added that language to the project description and put it on there as far as what the commission's voting on. So if we could take a 5-minute break and allow staff to.
Well, isn't that a condition of approval, Jeff?
It would be a project description change, which is condition number 1, but being it's their project description, we'd ask 1, concurrence from the applicants that they will revise their project description, and it'll become condition number 1. So we would want to check those 2 boxes and then show the commission what that wording would look like, which would be basically remove the treehouse and the string lights.
All right.
Or if the commission is comfortable with that project description as revised, I would recommend getting concurrence with the applicants, and then we can make that motion.
Okay, since we
Mr.
have,
Chair?
go ahead, yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could just supplement what Secretary Wilson just said in response to your question, Commissioner Kupiec. So the proposal would be with affirmation from the applicant that the project description would be changed. And just to clarify, there is a separate condition of approval that requires compliance with the project description. So in effect, it functions the same way as a condition of approval.
Okay.
You guys want to take your 5 minutes now? Or 10? Is that what your proposal is, Jeff?
I think we do it in less than 5. I think staff's ready to go right now if you would like.
Okay, let's go.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I can just read it into the record. Inserted into their project description would be the following sentence. An existing tree house and string lights will be removed as part of the proposed project.
Okay.
And Chair Pliche, sorry, I just promoted Kupiec. But Chair Pliche.
No, don't do it. Don't.
Chair Pliche, if we could just get concurrence from the applicants on record, and then we can move forward with the motion.
Yes, you have our concurrence.
Okay, so Bob, you have that motion, and there's only 3 of us voting. Am I allowed to second, or is that permissible from this threesome?
Chair Pliche, that is correct. You could second.
I will second then.
And then Chair Kupiec, the motion would be on number 3, that 3rd bullet, subject to the conditions of approval as revised today.
I accept that amendment.
Okay. Mr. Villalobos?
Commissioner Keller,
I abstain.
Commissioner Kupiec,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanauer,
Yeah, I before I state my vote, I would like to thank the applicants for their project considerations and revision. However, since it was not supported by the commission, I would still like to see it, the sports court relocated. So I am unable to make the findings to approve as presented at this time with the motion. So my vote will be in the negative no.
Chair Police.
I just want to say I wish you had had that treehouse on the plans because I think it's harmless where it is. But I think we need to get this thing approved if you want it approved and get moving on this pool. So you have to bring it down. So I vote aye in approval.
All right, the
Yes.
vote is 2-1-1. So I just looked at council. Is that a passing vote?
The motion is successful, yes.
Okay, great. Motion passes 2-1-1. Thank you.
Okay, thank you applicants. Good work and quite civilized. We appreciate that. Moving on, if we may, it's 11:25 and I know that we have we now are 4 strong, but I would like to maybe take a short break and continue on because Bob has to leave at 1 o'clock. We have enough time, I believe, to get through the Oak Creek Canyon subdivision modification or lot change at 13:55. So can we take a 10-minute break and come back? Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
Okay. And so I guess we'll be 4 strong in 10 minutes and we'll meet back here at let's just say 11:40. That'd be 14 minutes. Okay, thank you all.
Commissioners, this is Travis Seawards again. I want to introduce another new staff, Kathleen Volpe. This is her first time also at MPC.
Before Ms. Volpe starts her presentation, I'll just read it into the record really quick. The following is a hearing on the request of OCC Lot 2 LLC to consider case number 21 DVP 21 and to accept the previously adopted EIR 93 EIR 3 and addenda dated July 1993 and March 2003 as adequate environmental review for case number 21 DVP 21 pursuant to section 15162 of the state guidelines for the implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. My name is Kathleen Volpe, and I will be presenting the proposal for the OCC Lot 2 LLC New Single Family Dwelling and Accessory Structures Project. Here we have a vicinity map of the property to help orient you to the site. The project is located at 1355 Oak Creek Canyon Road in the inland area of Montecito. The parcel will be accessed from Oak Creek Canyon Road via a proposed driveway. The property is 5.7 acres and characterized by steep slopes. This parcel was created as Lot 2 of the Oak Creek Ranch subdivision, tract map 14239, approved in 1993 and recorded in 1997. Development envelopes were applied to the lots at the time of the subdivision approval. The project is located in the Resource Management Zone, RMZ, and the Montecito Hillside District, HMON. All development located within the RMZ zone requires a development plan, hence why the project is before your commission today. These photos show the existing site and conditions. We have photos from the top of the parcel showing the view southwest and southeast across the building envelope, and a view from the East Mountain Drive looking up towards the site. Here we look at the parcel site plan. All development will be located within the approved 0.97 acre development envelope located on the eastern portion of the lot, depicted here by the red outline. Though still sloped, this area represents the least sloped and least constrained portion of the site. In this slide, we see the proposed development within the development envelope. This project is a request for a development plan for a new 2,421 square foot single family dwelling and associated accessory development, including a detached 793 square foot guest house, a 790 square foot detached garage, and a 8.5 by 23 foot pool. Here we have the elevations of the proposed residence. The proposed residence, guest house, and garage have a maximum height of 19 feet, which meets the applicable height limit requirements for the Ridgeline and Hillside Development Guidelines and HMON overlay. Here are elevations of the guest house and elevations of the garage. With the approval of one requested modification, which will be discussed in the next slide, the project is consistent with all applicable MLUDC, RMZ zone, and HMON overlay requirements. Development is limited to the established development envelope and steps with the surrounding landscape following the natural mountainous setting, which is consistent with the purpose and intent of the RMZ zone and HMON overlay. The project is consistent with height, parking, and setback requirements. The applicant is requesting a modification through the development plan to allow for a detached garage. Per section 35.472.080 of the MLUDC, at the time of development plan approval, the review authority may modify the required parking specified to the applicable zone when the review authority finds that the modification would be justified. Here, the MLUDC requires single-family residential uses to provide 2 covered parking spaces and 1 uncovered parking space per dwelling. However, the RMZ zone prohibits construction of most detached accessory structures, including detached garages. Therefore, a modification to this development standard is required in order to comply with the parking requirements of the MLUDC. This is consistent with similar allowances provided to other properties in the resource management zone. As conditioned, the project would be consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan, including the Montecito Community Plan. Adequate services currently exist to serve the development. No tree removal is proposed, and the grading is limited to the established development envelope, which was created to protect biological resources and minimize grading. Additionally, the project is conditioned to further protect oak trees and to use natural colors and materials and landscaping to reduce visual impacts. Grading for the proposed project will not result in steep cuts and fills and has been designed with tiered retaining walls such that no retaining wall exceeds a height of 8 feet, which is consistent with the HMON overlay requirements. An EIR was certified as part of the original Oak Creek Ranch subdivision. The EIR and subsequent EIR addenda thoroughly analyzed the Oak Creek Ranch subdivision project, including the subject lot. No significant and unavoidable impacts that cannot be reduced through mitigation measures were found. The EIR and addenda have prescribed mitigation measures and a mitigation monitoring plan that were adopted as part of the conditions of approval for the subdivision. These conditions have been incorporated into this project. Along with the mitigation measures, the development envelopes were established to avoid or reduce impacts to less than significant levels. Because the current project meets the conditions for CEQA Guidelines Section 15162 by remaining within the development envelope and complying with the mitigation measures, no further environmental review is required. With that, staff recommends that your commission take the following actions. Make the required findings for approval of the project, including CEQA findings. Determine that the previously adopted EIR and addenda satisfy the CEQA requirements for the project and no subsequent EIR or ND is required. Determine that a modification to the development standards to allow accessory structures is justified in accordance with the Montecito Land Use and Development Code, and approve the project subject to the conditions of approval. This concludes my presentation. Staff is available for questions. Thank you.
Yes. Does anybody have a question? If not,
Chair
Go ahead.
Mludc, I'm sorry, did we miss the ex parte? Did I come in late or?
No, there was not an ex parte. You're correct in that. So, David, we should probably back up on that.
Right. I think it's, if the commission wants to take this time to do that, that's perfectly fine.
Let's do that right now, and before we go any further. Okay. Who, if any, have been to the site? Donna?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I visited the site with Mr. Banks, and also the applicants were there. So it was a good site visit of probably about 30 minutes. Walk the site, ask some questions, and thank you very much.
Okay. Bob, you were there, right?
I also visited the site with Mr. Banks and the owner and reviewed the project with them with drawings in hand. So we were there, same thing, 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah. That includes, I was with Bob as well. Susan, did you visit the site by chance?
No, I have not visited the site. This site, I have been up to the area with previous projects, so I am familiar with the location. Thank you.
All right. So first question, I'd just like to ask this question, if I may, to start out with. The site is a larger lot than that. It's a bigger parcel. So they're margining off a smaller section of it for this development. Is the balance of the parcel, would that be able to be split, or is that no more development on that parcel? county?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, no, that parcel could not be further split. It's zoned RMZ, and the minimum parcel size would not allow for any further subdivision potential.
Okay. All right. That answers that question. So do we have other questions from the Susan? You may.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if with the EIR done in 1993, when this development was created, and then again in 2003, that precedes the T fire, the Thomas fire, the debris flow, and a number of other natural situations. And I'm wondering why there was not felt to be any need for a further EIR given the changing conditions in this area. That would be directed to
staff.
Commissioner Keller, through the chair. While that is all accurate, there have, that site has burned, and there have been impacts over the last several years. It's not too dissimilar from many other areas of Montecito that have changed. In this particular instance, if you look at the EIR analysis and the issue areas that were identified and the mitigation measures created to minimize impacts, those remain applicable and appropriate. The development envelope hasn't changed, and that area of the site continues to be the most developable portion of the property, and avoids the more sensitive portions of the site, including a drainage on the western end. So while the site conditions have changed and it's rebounding over the last several years, we did not believe that anything of substance would require any further environmental review beyond what was previously identified.
Thank you. It was considered, though, and determined that it was not necessary.
That's correct.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering, with the RMZ prohibition against accessory structures, that does include a detached garage. It does not include a guest house. Mr. Seward?
Commissioner Keller, through the chair. Yes, so guest houses are allowed in the RMZ zone.
So they just drew the line. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble. Your volume is much lower than everyone else's. If you could be a little closer to the mic, please. Thank you. So they just drew the line at detached guest houses and wanted to have covered parking be in lieu of that. And the rationale for the RMZ prohibition was, would you reiterate and clarify that, please? The rationale for that prohibition?
As a point of clarification, prohibition as to why they would not want the garages?
Correct. It says they prohibited certain accessory structures, garages, not guest houses, but why did they make that distinction, and why did they prohibit anything?
The point of the RMZ zone is, or the intent is to limit development in that area. As to why a guest house is allowed or a garage is not, I cannot speak to. However, that's how it is dictated by the code.
Okay, and then another question in regard to the guest house. Is the square footage of the garage attached to the guest house, is that included in its total square footage?
Yeah, Commissioner Keller, through the chair, yes, it is.
Okay, and the prohibition or the grading that they say should be minimal. I presume this is a question for you, so that it's stated that the grading should not be over 1,500 cubic yards. Is that correct?
No. I don't.
There is a requirement that the grading be limited to 1,500 cubic yards, unless, for certain reasons. I just wanted to clarify that.
Commissioner Keller, through the chair, yes, that is correct. Within the HMON overlay.
All right, thank you. And in this current grading requires 3,900 cubic yards of cut, 1,300 cubic yards of fill, 1,600 cubic yards of export. So even when the 170 square yards of pool, which is allowed, is removed, it's still over 4,000 cubic yards of cut and fill, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And was there a reason given why the detached garage was so far from the house? It seems unusual that it would be as far at the other end of the property than the house is.
We might be able to get the applicant to address that.
Okay, if that's a better applicant question, I just wondered if that was something staff had approached. Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions for now.
Thank you. Do we want to hear from the applicant first, or no, Donna, you have a question for staff? Okay.
Just have a quick
Sure.
question in the comprehensive plan consistency categories under adequate services. The served by Montecito Water District, sanitary and fire, but APCD also says there is an on-site water well. So I think that probably would be helpful to include in that descriptive of adequate services. It usually is if there's an on-site well besides services from MWD. Just an asterisk there. Thank you.
Okay. So may we hear from the applicant now? Is that appropriate, staff? Are you prepared for that? Or can we move forward?
Yes, commissioners, we can move on to the applicant.
All right, Mr. Banks, is that you today?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Paluche. Brian Banks, excuse me, Chair Paluche. Brian Banks here, agent for the owners. We do have the owners, Kenny and Elizabeth Slot, in attendance, as well as representatives from the design team. But to answer Commissioner Keller's question about the thought process on the garage, if we went to staff's presentation slide 6, that shows the site plan, I can answer that pretty succinctly. So if that's possible, Kathleen, to throw that slide up, we can see the arrangement of the fire department's required hammerhead. And that was what, there you go. So you'll see in the white, that lighter white area there, that is the fire department's required turnaround area, hammerhead, or also known as a T. And so that basically the fire department requirements drove principally the site design. To answer the other question about the garage, it is a little bit interesting. I think staff did a good job. I think if you go back to the ordinance amendments that created these requirements in the RMZ zone, it is my experience that they just assumed a garage was included with those allowed accessory uses. Otherwise, it would be inconsistent with the ordinance, would be internally inconsistent, wherein it requires covered parking, but didn't specify garage as an accessory structure. I do know that every development in this tract includes a garage, if attached or detached, at least one. And the most recent project that your commission saw in, I think it was 2018 or 19 at lot 4, 1389, we indeed on that project had a detached garage, and this issue of modification or not never even came up. So I think it's one of those things where it was just an internal inconsistency in the code, and the assumption was that that all developments would require the covered parking per the MLUDC. So I hope that answers the question. And I just have a very, very brief, Mr. Chair.
Brian, one question further. Ms. Keller, spoke about grading, which is.
Because I recall the previous project on lot 4, and there was nothing about having to get a special modification for the detached garage. So it seemed quite inconsistent with what we'd experienced before. And thank you for explaining the location of the garage. That seemed unusual until you pointed out. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the hillside grading issue, I think just a point of clarification, those are guidelines and not ordinance maximums. So the HMON guidelines include, and that doesn't just apply to the Oak Creek Canyon subdivision or RMZ zoning. There are many properties, principally north of East Mountain Drive, that are not within the RMZ zone, which your commission wouldn't even see, that you would just need a land use permit, where these HMON guidelines are still, in play. And for the vast majority of those hillside Montecito homes, you're never going to be able to get under that trigger, because there's always that tension of bunkering in and burying the house to reduce its visibility and have it follow the topography. So that's principally a job for the MBAR to make that required, we'll call it finding, that they've reviewed the grading and the site design and it's minimized to the extent feasible. And therefore, that's why you don't really see that 1,500 cubic yard issue come up very often.
But Brian, wasn't part of the reason why you have this massive excavation and haul off was because of the request of MBAR regarding retaining walls that affected the actual height of the grading that exist?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, that's correct. Actually, the primary consideration is fire department access. And then when we get to my brief presentation, we'll kind of explain the design into it. But, it all starts and your commission knows the importance of it. And all of my projects, we start, the first thing we do is we meet with the fire marshal and we establish what their, minimum requirements are going to be in order to provide their services. And so that's a large part, and actually in our project plans and going back with staff over 14 months, that was part of the give and the take, was to break out the various grading quantities, what's absolutely required versus what are those that are part of the design discretion in terms of how the site's laid out and visibility and that sort of thing. And additionally, the Oak Creek Canyon subdivision map approvals, there's a variety of, I think there's numbers in the 50s or 60 different conditions that apply to these lots within Oak Creek Canyon that were approved by the board and as mitigation measures through the EIR. And a lot of those relate to retaining wall heights, minimization of grading, and importantly for this project, it was specific conditions that required natural grading contours, so that what they're trying to avoid are multiple stepped rectangular terraced types of things. So I think 6 or 8 months of our project review with our planners had been this back and forth to reduce the grading to the maximum extent feasible, but also comply with those map condition and mitigation measures to make it appear more natural. So what we call the meadow area here is the depositing site for the vast majority of the excavation to meet the other requirements. So we're dumping quite a bit of material to make that a naturalized, what we call the meadow. And then the rest that we can't accommodate because of the, less than 1 acre envelope, that results in the export that you see in the project description.
So does did MBAR or anyone require you to landscape over this fill that you're putting on the natural topography here?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, indeed, yeah. I mean, that's a meadow species. That's a NOMO type of grass. The whole building envelope is essentially landscaped, and we have that in our landscape plan.
Okay.
So with that, if we could, if I've answered the questions, I can just take you through our presentation. I think it'll take 3 minutes or less.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. We can go to, we know why we're here. We can go to the next slide, please. As staff has ably taken you through the vicinity map, I think this map is just helpful, Ariel, for context to see the various lots within the subdivision. As Commissioner Keller was recalling, Lot 4, which you'll see there, was the last project your commission saw a couple of years ago. I was actually involved in that project. That's actually under construction now. And then, obviously we're here at Lot 2, so that will just leave, you'll probably be glad to hear, one other lot after this one within Oak Creek Canyon, and it will reach its maximum build out. So the interesting thing I wanted to point out about Oak Creek Canyon, and for the commissioners that were at the site visit, I think they had an opportunity to view, it's kind of set into two different parts. What I'll call the western part of Oak, on the western part of Oak Creek, which is that large drainage channel you'll see bisecting the subdivision. Those are at a much lower elevation than I think what we all think of as the typical Oak Creek Canyon lot, such as Lot 4 that you recently saw. So as you move along Oak Creek Canyon and you go to the east and you traverse around Oak Creek itself, it gains quite a bit of elevation, and it terminates at the eastern side at its highest elevation. Therefore, Lot 3 at the extreme end, that's the highest point, and then they kind of go down gradually to the west. So absolutely, while we're within the Oak Creek Canyon subdivision, our lot and our development is in the least elevated portion of the subdivision. Next slide, please. As you've seen, what in staff's presentation, what we're trying to describe here, and this was useful for the MBAR, the location of the site relative to the whole subdivision. And so where I placed my arrow, I tried to, as best I could, put it right at the elevation of the building pad. So you'll see to the right of that arrow is the existing house next door, which is approximately at the same elevation. So you can see, just for context, that this is not like your typical hillside and ridgeline condition where we're building up into, a steeply sloped area of the hillside. So, and this would be the most visible location from a public street. And I think for the commissioners that made it to the site visit, we kind of pointed down that direction and you can see East Mountain Drive from the building pad area. Next slide, please. I'll skip through this. Staff did a great job of just the history of Oak Creek Canyon. So in terms of the design approach, so the idea here was to, you'll see that this is, when you see the plans, that this is not your typical Oak Creek Canyon development, wherein the applicant, based on the land values and their desire to develop the properties, want to maximize the building envelope, since you're allowed to develop within it, and maximize the square footage. The approach here was basically to have this be more of a garden site. So the buildings that Britt Jewett, the architect, put together were intended to be these little clusters of low slung, almost like accessory buildings. So the principal feature are, as we described earlier, directly in response to the HMON and the Oak Creek Canyon map conditions, and then of course fire department. So as we discussed, we start with the fire department. What's left over essentially is what we can develop. Next slide, please. As staff presented, we are in compliance with all of the policies. Important, I think, to note that for this 5.7 acre lot, our proposed development totals only 43% of the MBAR's recommended FAR, just kind of showing how diminutive it is in scale, meeting all of the height requirements, of course, and the pad sizes were kind of developed, consistent with the neighborhood. We wanted to make sure that when we went to the MBAR our first time, that they had a good understanding, and we developed some exhibits showing the different developments in Oak Creek Canyon and how our pads were kind of in the same arrangement, or at least appropriately sized. And again, as I stated, we were in this review process with planning staff for, over a year, and the buildings really haven't changed at all. What changed throughout that iterative process was things related to grading and the contouring and minimizing retaining walls and so forth, directly to answer Commissioner Keller's questions about, that HMON guideline for the grading. Next slide, please. Just by way of context, this was a project that the MPC approved in 2014, which would be, I won't say typical, but which would be more common for, lots of these values, 5 acres plus in size. And all in, it had about 12,000 square feet of development and about 7,000 cut and 3,000 export. Next slide, please. In contrast, just to show you the kind of the difference of the approach, our proposed project totals approximately 4,300 square feet of structural development, about 60% less than the previously approved project, and 5,200 cubic yards of grading, about 25% less. And I think the most important component is the reduction in export, and therefore the number of truck trips. So almost half as much export as was previously approved. Next slide, please. Just the timeline, we went to the HOA, which is a requirement of the CCNRs back in December of 2020, the MBAR review in 21 and 22. We filed our development plan application in June of 21. And then, as I said, the pretty extensive back and forth with staff. And next slide, please. As staff presented, we meet all the requirements for the Oak Creek Canyon subdivision, Mludc, and MBAR. Actually, and that concludes it. But staff, if we can go back up to that one elevation slide, I think it's 2 slides back. I'll answer one. I'll pre-answer. Perfect. Pre-answer one question that was a comment at our last MBAR meeting. And so while they were supportive of the project and recommended that we, proceed, one of the comments was that we consider reducing a retaining wall south of the guest house and garage that you see here. And I don't have my annotation tool up, but you'll see the mounding of the meadow. So we did do that comment. We did take care of that comment. We reduced, there was a little path there with a secondary little garden retaining wall. So we eliminated that in the plans that are before you today, and we bermed up to use again some more of that cut material, and we bermed it up to the required retaining wall for the pad to eliminate that lower retaining wall. So they didn't get a chance to see this iteration, but we've addressed that comment in these plans. And so with that, I'll conclude, and of course we're available for any questions. As I say, we do have the owners and representatives from our design team here as well. Thank you.
Do the owners have any comments at this time?
No.
You're okay. All right. Yes. Let's go with Donna first, and then Susan.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for that presentation, and staff, of course. Zeroing in on the impervious, which I think, Brian, you and I talked about, is about 9,000, is that right? On the plans of impervious flat work. And there, I had a discussion with you regarding permeable concrete. And you said basically fire advised that that can't be a material that is used because it degrades. Could you just address that a bit?
Chair and Commissioner, yeah, so specific to fire department required access. So permeable materials can be used in areas that aren't part of their required access areas. The main issue that we have is we've designed, they will not approve a driveway any steeper than 15%. So that's kind of how the layout went. And so when you have a sloped driveway, they have certain standards in terms of material. And for our slope here, it has to be brushed or swept concrete. you can't do any, they won't even allow asphalt or, like a chip seal or that sort of thing. And then they have the weight standards that require compaction as well, that basically preclude the use of any impermeable materials, because you're going to compact that access, road and turnaround area to the extent that it's no longer permeable.
Okay, so the slope is a component to that.
It's correct, Commissioner.
right,
It's the primary material choice is driven by the fire department standards, not by what the applicant would want to do. And just to say, we do have a hydrologic report, which wasn't part of the application materials, but that was pretty extensively done by Ashley and Van.
That was my next question. Stormwater control plan, what tier it is, etc.
Yeah, so Chair, Commissioner, we fall outside of the NPDES urban area. So we don't have those typical, tier 1 through tier 4 requirements, but we are subject to the state rules and flood control rules in terms of the total amount of area. Since we're doing less than the required the site disturbance areas for, permeable materials and those sort of things, we don't have that tier 1 through tier 4 same requirement, but we do have this hydrologic analysis requirement that was also part of the EIR and track map conditions. So we've done all that.
Okay, that's all my questions right now. Thank you.
Okay, Susan.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was a little unclear on your slide where you showed the proposed versus previously improved. In the MBAR meeting, they did ask about eliminating the retaining wall and pathway. Did that illustration you gave us show an elimination of the retaining wall and pathway? Where had it been before, please?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Keller, yes, we did eliminate that. And I think if staff can pull up, I think the presentation image is probably the easiest of that south elevation. I don't know if I can use annotation. I know in MBAR I can annotate. I'm not sure that I have the ability to annotate it, but I think I can probably explain it when we get it back up on the screen. So that would be, while staff's doing that, that would be south. Oh, thank you.
So where that little dotted line is?
So I'll try to explain. So if we bisected this into hemispheres, right down the middle, you'll see an opening between the retaining walls right in the center there. That's a little grotto feature. If you go to the right or the east, that length between that's the guest house there and then the garage on the right hand side, there was a garden wall that ran along that entire length between the guest house, the lower area between the guest house and the garage. And that was the specific comment that the MBAR had. And so we eliminated that, and you'll see kind of how the contours of the meadow undulate there. And so what we did is we bermed it up. Instead of requiring that lower garden retaining wall, we just completely eliminated and pushed the earth up against the required retaining wall, which is, to support the structures. And that got rid of a little bit of export as well.
Thank you. You refer to this area south of the houses, and I just want to congratulate you because the previous slide with the development that had previously been included is obviously not nearly as attractive as this new version.
We think so.
But you're referring to this area south of the development as meadow. Do you really anticipate that will be planted and irrigated and be an actual meadow? Or is it, there is going to be water used and irrigation used, and is it may I just ask what that intends to be, because this area does not currently have any kind of lush growth, and what is the intent for this property?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Keller, we do have Amy Blakemore, our landscape architect, here. She was actually able to pop out to an appointment and still make it back. So I'm glad she's here because this is definitely in her wheelhouse, and we're going to let her answer for me.
So can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so the meadow will be irrigated. We are proposing to do a no-mow grass on that, which is kind of a softer grass that requires, thus the name, very little mowing, and also much less water than a standard marathon sod. So
What is
that,
what is the square footage of that area? Can you roughly tell us?
Brian, can you help me with that? I'm not at my desk. I am out and about.
I will try. I think actually
It will be on my irrigation plan as the zones for the meadow. So those square
Oh,
footages.
okay, perfect. Let me pull that up. So on the irrigation plan, all right, let me zoom in here. Meadow, low water, 1,505 square feet. No, that can't be right. There's three different
Is
ones.
there, I think because of the water
15,
pressure, we
and
divided it up.
Yeah, 15, 15, and 15. So approximately
So
4,500 square feet.
Okay.
Does that, Amy, does that sound right?
Yes, I remember dividing it up because of the water pressure. So
Is that going to be watered by the wells or how's it?
our intention is to provide as much water for the landscaping as possible via the wells. So we'll be setting up the system that's their primary source of irrigation, and in the event that there is any issue with that supply, we would be able to service it with Montecito water, but the intention is that it all comes from the wells on site.
So it's about 10 or 12% of an acre or small.
Rough, correct.
Yeah.
And-
Sue,
and
do you
just,
have more questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll just back up on that. To finalize that last question, when we did the water calculations, each lot in Montecito gets a baseline minimum of 1 acre foot of water, regardless essentially of parcel size. So even though we're over 5 acres, closer to 6, we still only get that allocation. And in Amy's plan, understanding the water use, issues that we have, I think we calculated our plan was even less than half an acre foot. So even if we didn't use the wells and we used district water, we'd be under half of our allocation.
Thank you. No, it's just from this rendering, it makes it look like a much larger area. You have said it's a 5.7 acre parcel, and the building plot, the platform is how large of what percentage of that?
Commissioner Chair, Commissioner Keller, just under an acre, I think 0.97. Staff could correct me if I'm wrong.
So you still have 4.7 almost acres of undeveloped property, and only an acre and a half of that, or less than an acre, is this meadow. What is the plan for the rest of it, and where is the rest of it?
To remain, sorry, Commissioner, through the chair, to remain as it is today. The property got pretty severely impacted in the Thomas fire, lost a lot of eucalyptus trees and several oaks. So the owners in the years since have been trying to maintain and doing soil stabilization and planted some mitigation, not required mitigation, but planted some oaks to replace some of the vegetation was lost. But essentially there's no plans for that area.
Okay, so this meadow is just the area that the house and guest house look onto. So it's just a pleasant sort of viewing area then.
Commissioner, that's correct. I mean, we're not filling it up with structures.
Okay, thank you. It was, as I said, it looks pretty extensive in this. So I was wondering how much that would involve, and your reassurance about the water allocation and the adequacy of the water is important. Thank you.
Okay. Any more you want to speak to, Brian?
Mr. Chair, no, we are done. Thank staff. Their presentation was basically mirrored mine. So thank you very much.
So am I to interpret the fact that because the applicant owns the property to the east, a large home, that's the reason why we're getting the only consideration for a smaller use of this lot? Otherwise, anybody else would probably consider something maybe not as big as the last one, but definitely larger than this.
Mr. Chair, I'll let the owner answer that. I think that's the true statement.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I had to get something out of you.
Yeah, we live next door, my wife and I, and we don't want any big impacts next door. And this, we have a big family, so just having a little extra space was all we needed.
Okay. All right. So we're on a somewhat of a tight schedule with Bob. So Bob, you have any comments before you want to go?
No, we're in questions, so when we get to comments, yeah, I'll make it.
All righty. So let's go move forward. Do we want to start with comments now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I want to commend the architects for, the work that they've done. I think that the lesser impact on this site for development is just a plus. I mean, anybody could build a 12,000 square foot house. But I think that the massing and the breaking up of the elements, I mean, I think it's going to be wonderful for the owner. I think the residential nature and kind of the ease, it's kind of a very relaxed development of the property. I realize, the hammerheads kind of drive everything, but, I think in terms of the constraints that the owner has in terms of the development of the property, I think the project and, its development impact is admirable. I think that, planting meadow grasses and having some way of, buffering the kind of leaving the rest of the site in its kind of natural state. I mean, I'm sure things, will evolve over time, but I think as the project is proposed, I have no problems with it.
Okay, Donna, Susan?
Wait,
Yeah.
Chair and commissioners, I don't know if we've had public comment yet.
No. we haven't.
I'm somehow I've been skipping that today. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Mr. Public, go right ahead. Mrs. Public. So, David, do we have comments?
So, no, but I with the caveat here. So, we don't have anyone who is in the Zoom meeting who has signed up for public comment. But we did receive a comment letter during Ms. Volpe's presentation. For your consideration, I did forward it to you. I suspect that nobody's read it yet, but as part of our process, I did want to get it to you and give you the option to incorporate it as part of the record should the commission wish to do so. And that letter is from Margaret Arvey. And I believe it came with an attached video. So I think we can do a couple things. If no one's read it, then, and the commission does not want to vote it into the record, then I just simply delete it from the record, official record. If you would like to take time to read it, then you probably would have to take a break to do so.
Is there a reason why we're receiving this now and not earlier?
I can't speak for Ms. Arvey on that, but staff did communicate with her yesterday, and told her she could submit a comment letter. We can't comment on the tardiness, however.
Okay. Commission?
I don't even understand it.
I think it's unfortunate. I would have liked the opportunity to review it, but I don't know how we can vote this into the record at this time without proper review. And I believe we're under a time constraint. I think those who wish to submit a letter are well aware or should be of the time constraints that we are under to accept public record. And this doesn't, unfortunately, it's not adequate to review. So I don't personally know how we could accept it at this time into public record. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but we'd have to take a break and consider it.
Brian, I want to just ask the applicant, have you dealt with this at all in the past? The consideration, did you talk to the county flood control, or is this I don't need to talk about it, I guess, if it's not part of the.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure, please.
Mr. Chair and Commission, before you engage the applicant, I would just recommend that the commission take action on whether or not this
Accept or
information,
not.
I haven't seen it, but if it's going to be in the record, then I would advise that the commission take action and give the applicant an opportunity to both review and respond to it. But for that to be the first step.
If we haven't read it, can we accept it into the record? Is that a protocol we could do?
I think he's saying we can't. Is that
Right.
correct, Mr. Pettit?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I, as Mr. Villalobos suggested, if you were to accept it into the record, I would recommend that you take a break to review it before taking action on bringing it into the record.
Correct.
Mr. Pettit, would it be adequate if Mr. Villalobos read the letter so we could all hear it together and it could be decided at that point? It's not a very long letter.
But the information regarding the letter is more than just a paragraph or two. So it's you know.
It's not even
Commissioner,
that this is on the property. This is a drainage pipe. Is it on the property or is it off the property? It's off the property. I don't know why we're, you know.
Yeah, my inclination is to not take this in consideration and proceed as if it was tardy and it's tardy. But that's my position. I don't know.
Thank you. May we just ask, probably Mr. Banks or Mr. Slot knows, she's referring to the RV and GABA properties that are downhill.
So Chair and Commissioners, as council indicated, we need to take action on the letter before we talk about it. So we're either gonna vote it in the record or not. So
Well, let's take a vote.
Thank you. I move to vote it into the record so we can discuss it.
I mean, one of the questions before I vote on this, are we talking about something that is on the project property or not?
That was my question, but they said we couldn't discuss it before we voted on it.
Oh, I want to ask Brian, do you know if this is on the property?
Commissioner Palucci, Commissioner Kupia, I am not aware of where this, it's definitely not within the development envelope where we're proposing.
Well, I'm going to say, if it's not within the development envelope of this project, I don't want this admitted. It's late and it's maybe, you know, it's just not part of our project. There may be somebody that has to deal with it, but it's not this owner.
Can we at least get clarification from that, from Mr. Slot, or I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, who met with this individual?
Yes, I met with Mrs. Avery and we share a property line and there is a drainage culvert that we share, but it's probably 3 acres from the development envelope to the west. It's way up by the road. So I don't know what the letter says, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the development before you.
Thank you.
It's good enough for me.
So we have a motion on the floor to accept this.
Sorry,
If
I will end my motion because with that clarification, if that's what I will remove, rescind, I will not make. Thank you.
Okay.
So we have to have a motion to go
we
ahead.
need to have an affirmative motion to accept
Right.
it into the record. So you either vote and it doesn't get enough votes to accept it in, or also alternatively, if you don't make a motion to affirmatively vote it into the record, it's not going to be.
So I withdrew my previous motion.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So either the other two, Bob or Donna, have a motion.
I move not to accept it into the record.
I second, if that's the way we're going, yes, unfortunately, because of the timing. I wish we had the time to review it. We don't. It was a late, very, very late submission. So I second.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Mr. Villalobos or Brian, you got something more to say?
Mr. Chair, I was just going to clarify the process. Per the commission's procedures, a record that is submitted late is not in the record unless it's affirmatively brought into the record. So it's unnecessary to take any action.
So we remain silent on this issue.
Okay.
And it's not part of the record.
Okay.
All right. So are we still in deliberation here? We have any more comments from the commission?
I'd just like to say, as far as comments, I think this this development is as respectful as can be wished for in this very constrained development envelope. And with the retaining wall being addressed that MBAR had issues with, and that landscaping, I assume, is under the WELO ordinance that would be considered, as well as MSD, and that they're respectful of water use regarding the wells that they will be drawing from. I think this project is as good as it can be. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else comments? Bob,
I concur.
You're content? Susan? Can't hear you? Still can't hear you?
To hear me say it, I agree.
Okay.
You look at the alternative, what has been here is really an elegant solution, and it solves everyone's needs, the owners and the planners.
Yeah. Well, the only cause of small concern would be the haul off, and hopefully it will be done in a process that's timely and doesn't cause any more duress to. There's not many neighbors. The neighbors are, since it's the first lot, there's not much effect on people. Anyway, so I'm prepared here to hear a motion, I believe.
I make a motion to accept the county's recommendation. I'm trying to find the page. Make the required findings for approval of the project in attachment A of the staff report. Determine that the project is exempt from CEQA to the state CEQA guidelines section as set forth in the notice of exemption in attachment C, and approve the project subject to the conditions of attachment B.
I second that.
Okay, we have a vote, please, David.
Commissioner Keller,
Aye.
Commissioner Kupiec,
Aye.
Commissioner Senauer,
Aye.
Chair Puliche.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, thank you, applicants. Good presentation, Brian. I appreciate it.
Thank you, commissioners and staff. We very much appreciate it. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think that concludes, if I'm not mistaken. Jeff, are you still there?
Chair and commissioners, that concludes our meeting for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
for being here. Appreciate it. Have a good day. Bye-bye.